The Kingpin's Bride. She offered him her grandmother's ring to destroy the man who broke her. She walked into the most dangerous man's office in the city with shaking hands and a diamond ring she couldn't afford to lose. She asked him to ruin the wedding that ruined her. He said yes, but his price wasn't money. It was her. For 2 weeks. And by the end of it, neither of them would walk away the same. If you're watching from anywhere in the world right now, drop a comment and tell me what city you're tuning in from. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button, stay with me all the way to the end, because what starts as a fake date turns into something no one, not even Adrian Voss, saw coming. The rain had been falling over the city of Blackhaven for 3 straight days. The kind of rain that didn't so much fall as settle, soaking into coats and bones and the gray concrete of the docks, until everything smelled like wet iron. Most people hated it. Adrian Voss didn't mind. Rain kept the streets quieter. Rain washed things away. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his office on the 42nd floor of the Hallbrook Tower, hands in the pockets of a charcoal suit that cost more than most people in the city made in a year, and watched the harbor lights blur through the glass. Down there, somewhere in the fog, 3 of his container ships were being unloaded. None of the cargo on those ships was listed on any official manifest. None of it ever would be. Behind him, a phone rang once, then stopped. "Boss." The voice belonged to Marco, his second, a thick-necked man who'd been with him for 9 years and had the scars to prove it. "Downstairs says there's a woman here to see you." Adrian didn't turn. "Tell downstairs I don't take walk-ins." "I did. She won't leave." "Then make her leave." There was a pause, long enough that Adrian finally turned his head a fraction. Marco was standing in the doorway, arms crossed over a jacket that was too tight in the shoulders, looking like he'd just been handed a puzzle with a piece missing. "She said to tell you," Marco said slowly, "that she's not here to waste your time, that she has $1,200 in cash and a ring she wants to sell you, and she knows who you are." Adrian raised one dark eyebrow. "She knows who I am." "That's what she said, and she's still standing in my lobby. Standing real still, actually, like she's afraid to breathe too loud." That almost made him smile. Almost. Adrian Voss hadn't truly smiled at anything in a long time, and he wasn't about to start because some woman with a ring and a death wish had wandered into his building on a rainy Tuesday. "Send her up," he said. Marco blinked. "You sure?" "If she knows who I am and she came anyway, either she's stupid or she's desperate. Either way, I want to see which." Marco shrugged, a small gesture that communicated over 9 years of partnership, a great deal of silent opinion, and disappeared. Adrian turned back to the window. The rain kept falling. Down on the water, a tugboat pushed one of his freighters into a berth, slow and dumb and patient as an animal. 5 minutes later, the elevator chimed. Elena Carter had been counting her own breaths the entire way up. She'd started doing that in college when her anxiety got bad during exams. 4 in, 7 hold, 8 out. It was supposed to slow her heart rate. It was not working. The elevator had mirrors on 3 sides, and no matter which way she turned, she saw herself. A woman in a damp gray coat with her hair coming loose from a messy bun, clutching a small velvet box so hard her knuckles had gone white, with mascara just slightly smudged under her left eye, because she'd cried in the cab on the way over and then tried to fix it and failed. She did not look like a woman who belonged in the elevator of the Hallbrook Tower. She looked like a woman who had taken a wrong turn on her way to a PTA meeting. The doors opened onto a floor of glass and dark wood, quiet as a cathedral. A receptionist, young, sharp-faced, wearing a headset and the kind of blazer Elena couldn't have afforded on 2 months' salary, looked up, glanced her over, and did not smile. "Miss Carter." "Yes." "Straight through. End of the hall. Mr. Voss is waiting." Elena nodded. She could not remember how to make her legs work for a second. Then she made them work. The hallway was longer than it needed to be. There were paintings on the walls, huge and abstract and probably famous, though she didn't recognize any of them. Her shoes made a small wet sound on the marble, and she winced with every step, thinking, I'm tracking rain into a rich man's office. He's going to look at my feet first." The door at the end was already open. She stopped in the doorway. The office was enormous. It had the kind of silence that only very expensive spaces have, where even the air seemed to have been filtered of anything cheap. Against the far wall, framed by a wall of gray sky and falling water, a man stood with his back to her. He did not turn around right away. "Come in, Miss Carter," he said without looking. His voice was lower than she'd imagined it, and calmer, and it made something cold move down her spine. "Close the door." She did. The click of it sounded very loud. "Sit down?" There were 2 leather chairs in front of his desk. She sat in the one on the left because it was closer to the door, and then she felt stupid for having thought about the door in that way, as though she'd be able to outrun him if it came to that, as though there was a version of this where running was an option. Adrian Voss turned. She had not seen a picture of him. There were no pictures of him. He was in his late 30s, maybe 40, with black hair combed back from a face that was not handsome exactly, but was difficult to look away from. Sharp cheekbones, a mouth that looked like it had learned how not to smile, and eyes the color of wet slate. He moved the way very tall men sometimes do, careful, like he'd been asked to be careful. There was a scar at the edge of his jaw, thin and pale. He didn't acknowledge her staring. He sat down behind the desk and leaned back. "You have $1,200, he said. "And a ring." "Yes." "You know who I am?" "Yes." "And you came anyway." Elena swallowed. "Yes." He studied her. It was the most thorough look she had ever been subjected to. It wasn't sexual. It was worse than that somehow. It was the way a man looks at a lock he's trying to decide whether to pick or break. "So tell me," Adrian Voss said, "what would possess a woman like you to walk into my building?" "What?" She'd rehearsed this. On the cab ride over, in the elevator, even in the hallway, she'd rehearsed the words. They came out almost none of the way she'd practiced. My fiancé, ex-fiancé, is getting married on Saturday." Adrian's face did not change. "To someone else. Obviously. I mean, not to me. Clearly, he was my—" She stopped, took a breath. "Foreign. Sorry, let me start again." "Take your time." "His name is Daniel Prescott. He's the son of Richard Prescott, the shipping family." At that, something flickered in Adrian's face. Not recognition, exactly. More like a tiny private amusement. He knew the name. Of course he knew the name. Everyone on this coast knew the Prescott name. "We were together for 4 years, Elena went on. "We were engaged for almost 1. 2 months ago, he came home from a weekend in Boston and told me he'd met someone. Her name is Vivian Ashford. Her father owns half the commercial real estate between here and Portland. Daniel said—" She stopped, tried to keep her voice flat. "Daniel said he'd been confused about what he wanted. That he loved me, but he wasn't in love with me. That he hoped we could still be friends." "And you said?" "I said, please leave." "And did he?" "He took the dog." For just a second, something close to a smile moved at the corner of Adrian Voss's mouth. It was gone before she could be sure it had been there. "I see." "The wedding is on Saturday at the Ashford estate north of the city. 300 people. It's being covered by Harper's. And I was invited." "Were you?" "Yes, on cream stationery, with a handwritten note from his mother saying she hopes there are no hard feelings." "And you're planning to go?" "I am planning to go." Adrian leaned forward and steepled his fingers. "Miss Carter," he said, "I'm going to ask you something and I'd like an honest answer. How exactly did you decide that the person you needed for this was me?" Elena's throat closed. She had not prepared for this question because the honest answer was humiliating, and until this moment she'd somehow believed she might get away with not saying it. "I work at Meriwether Day School," she said. "I teach 5th grade English." "All right." "One of my students, her name is Sophia. Her father is—" Elena looked at her own hands. "Her father is one of your drivers, a man named Thomas." Adrian's expression did not change, but something in the room did. The temperature, maybe. A millimeter colder. "Tomas Valdez." "Yes." "Sophia came to school last year with a note. She needed a form signed and her mother was sick and her father was unavailable. I took her home that afternoon to make sure she got there. And her father, Tomas, was home. He had just come back from somewhere. He was in a bad way." "Was he?" "He was bleeding. Not a lot, but some. And he was very polite. He offered me coffee. He asked if I'd gotten Sophia's permission slip signed. His wife came downstairs and scolded him for not being dressed. Elena smiled, very faintly, though she didn't know she was doing it. She was furious at him, not at me. Adrian said nothing. I didn't ask what he did for work, Elena went on. But a few weeks later, Sophia brought in a photograph for a family project. A Christmas photo. Her father, her mother, her in a red dress. And at the edge of the picture, a man in a black coat who was not her uncle. Sophia pointed at him and said, "That's Mr. Voss. He got me my bike." And then the other kids came over and she put the picture away. She lifted her eyes to his. "I went home that night and I looked you up, Mr. Voss. I couldn't find much. There's barely anything written about you that's real, but there's enough. And I told myself I would forget what I saw. And I did. For almost a year. What changed? My fiancé left me. Yes. But that's not what changed." She looked at him. He was very still, very focused, and she understood, suddenly and without being told, that he was not a man you could lie to comfortably. Not because he would catch you, because he would let you, and watch, and remember. "He didn't just leave me," she said quietly. "He made sure everyone knew why, that I wasn't enough, that I didn't fit, that I was..." She made a small, helpless gesture. The version of him before he got serious. His family agrees. His friends agree. The whole city agrees. I've been at grocery stores where women stop talking when I walk past. I went to my own cousin's engagement party last month and his mother was there. Daniel's mother. She hugged me and told me she'd always hoped Daniel would find the right girl, in front of everyone. And you didn't slap her. I smiled and said I was happy for them. Adrian shook his head, once, almost to himself. "So I'm going to the wedding," Elena said. "Because if I don't go, they win twice. Once for taking him and once for making me invisible. And I cannot..." Her voice cracked, and she stopped and steadied it. "I cannot walk into that ballroom alone, Mr. Voss. I don't have 4 years to find someone else. I don't have 1 week. I need someone who will make every person in that room stop breathing when I walk in on his arm. I need them to wonder. I need Daniel to look at me and not be able to finish his own vows." "And you think I would do?" "I think you would be more than enough." He was silent for a long moment. "The ring," he said. She set the velvet box on his desk, slid it across. Her hand was steadier than it had any right to be. "It was my grandmother's. It's the only thing I have left of her. It's a full carat. The setting is antique platinum. My mother had it appraised for insurance 2 years ago, $11,400, plus the $1,200 in cash." She paused. "I know that's not what you charge for anything, Mr. Voss. I know this is a joke to you, but it's everything I have." He did not open the box. He studied her instead, for what felt like a very long time, long enough for her to start counting her breaths again. "Put it away," he said finally. Miss Carter, put the ring away." She picked up the box. Her hands were not steady this time. "You're refusing." "I haven't said that." "Then what?" "Answer me one more question." "All right." He leaned forward. The slate-colored eyes found hers and held them in a way that made it impossible to look at anything else. "What would you do," he asked, "if I said yes?" What? She did not have an answer. She had prepared for no, and she had prepared for laughter, and she had half prepared, in a corner of her mind she did not want to acknowledge, for something worse. She had not prepared for yes. "I don't know," she said. "That's the right answer." He stood. He was taller than she'd realized. He walked around the desk, not toward her, just to the side of it, and leaned back against it with his arms folded. "I'm going to tell you some things, Miss Carter, and you're going to listen. Is that understood?" "Yes." "First, I don't need your grandmother's ring. I don't need your $1,200. If I agree to this, you will take that box home with you, and you will put it back wherever you got it." "Mr. Voss?" "I'm not finished." She closed her mouth. "Second, you walked in here because of a story a little girl told you a year ago and a photograph you weren't supposed to see. Tomas Valdez is a good man, and I owe him his daughter's childhood and more. But I want you to understand something, because I don't think you do. Not really. Not yet." He tilted his head. The version of me that Sofia Valdez knows? The man who buys her a bicycle? That man exists. He's real. I am him. But he is a very small part of a much larger person. And the larger person is not kind, Miss Carter. The larger person does not buy bicycles. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Yes? Say it. Her mouth was dry. You're not a good man. I'm not a good man. He said it without any particular weight, the way someone else might say, I'm not from around here. If we do this, you will meet people you should not meet. You will see things you should not see. For 2 weeks, you will live inside a very small window into my life, and then we will close that window, and you will go back to Meriwether Day School, and you will teach 5th grade English, and you will not call this number again. Not ever. Are we clear? Yes. Third. He paused. You're not ready. You walked through my lobby with mascara smudged under your left eye. You sat down in the chair closer to the door. Your hands have not stopped shaking since you sat down. When you talked about your ex, you looked at the floor. When you talked about his mother, you looked at your own lap. If I walked you into the Ashford wedding on Saturday as you are now, everyone in that room would know within 4 seconds exactly what we were doing, and my reputation would not survive it. More importantly, and here his voice for the first time softened a fraction, yours wouldn't either. You would be worse off than if you hadn't gone at all. She felt her eyes sting. She would not cry. She would not cry in front of this man. So what are you saying? I'm saying that if I agree to this, I agree to all of it. I don't pose as your date. I do not rent myself out for an evening. I take you apart and I rebuild you, Miss Carter, from your walk to your voice to the way you hold a champagne glass. And when I am finished, when you walk into that wedding, you will not be the woman Daniel Prescott left. You will be someone he is not equipped to even look at. I have 2 weeks. I need all of them. And you will do exactly as I say when I say it. He waited. Or you can take your ring and leave, and I'll forget this conversation happened. There is no middle. Choose. Somewhere in the building, a phone rang and was answered. The rain hit the window in a long, soft sheet. Elena Carter, 5th grade English teacher, engagement ring clutcher, 31 years old, sat in a leather chair in the office of a man the city whispered about in hushed voices, and realized her hands had finally stopped shaking. I'll do it, she said. Say it properly. I'll do all of it. I'll do what you say. Adrian Voss looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once and pressed a button on his desk. Marco, bring the car around. Miss Carter will be staying in the East Guest Suite for the next 14 days. Have someone pack her things from her apartment and deliver them by 10 tomorrow. Cancel all her direct deposits and her mail. Tell Rosa to prepare the downstairs study. We'll start there tonight. He released the button. Elena was staring at him. I didn't agree to move in with you. Yes, you did. You said you do what I said. This is the first thing. I have a job. You have a 2-week leave of absence beginning tomorrow. Headmaster Vance will be informed personally. Your landlord will be paid 2 months ahead. Your cat, I don't have a cat. He paused. Good. I have a goldfish. The goldfish comes with you. She opened her mouth and closed it again. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice that sounded a great deal like her mother was screaming. She ignored it. Okay. Good. He walked back around the desk and picked up a file, opened it, and began reading as though she were no longer in the room. She sat there for almost a full minute before she understood that she was dismissed. She stood. Mr. Voss? Yes. Why are you doing this? He did not look up from the file. I haven't decided yet, he said. Come back tomorrow morning and ask me again. Get. That night, Adrian Voss stayed late in his office. Marco came in around midnight with a single tumbler of scotch and set it on the desk without being asked. He had been doing that for 9 years. He did not leave immediately, which was unusual. All right, Adrian said, not looking up. Say it. School teacher. Yes. Mascara on her face, ring in her hand, goldfish at home. Yes. You said yes. Adrian finally looked up. You got something to add, Marco. Marco looked at his boss for a long moment. He had seen Adrian Voss order a man shot at a dinner table and then finish his soup. He had seen him refuse to take a meeting with a state senator for being 7 minutes late. He had seen him put a glass down so carefully after a phone call that the glass had cracked under its own weight. He had never, in 9 years, seen him agree to do something because a woman with shaking hands had asked him to. "Nope," Marco said. "Nothing to add." "That's what I thought." Marco started to leave, then turned back at the door. "Boss?" The Prescott kid, Daniel. His father used to do business with Callahan. Adrian paused, the scotch halfway to his lips. Everyone in the organization knew what Callahan's name meant, and no one said it out loud after 11 at night. Dominic Callahan had been Adrian's mentor, his partner, and the closest thing he had ever had to a father. Dominic Callahan had also sold him out 11 years ago for a deal worth less than the cost of Adrian's suit, and the only reason Dominic Callahan was no longer alive was that Adrian had made very sure of it, personally, in a warehouse down on the South Docks on a Tuesday night, much like this one. Richard Prescott, Daniel's father, had done shipping contracts with Callahan. "When?" Adrian asked. "Back in the day, before the trouble. I checked when the name came up." "You checked fast." "I had a feeling." Adrian set the glass down. "Is he connected now?" "Prescott?" "Nah, clean as a whistle these days. Deacon at his church. 2 galleries downtown. Donates to the Police Widows Fund. But the old man, Richard, he knew Callahan. They were friendly. Whether that means anything, I don't know." Just thought you'd want to know." "I do. Thank you." Marco nodded and left. The door clicked shut behind him. Adrian sat for a long time in the silence of his office, listening to the rain. He had told Elena Carter, truthfully, that he had not yet decided why he said yes. There had been something in her, the quiet defiance he'd mentioned to no one, but that alone was not enough. He had turned down more interesting requests from more dangerous people for less trouble. He had agreed to this for reasons he was not yet willing to name, and which, on examination, he found he was not entirely comfortable with. But the name Prescott changed things. He lifted the glass again. Drank. The rain kept falling. Elena could not sleep. She had been shown to a bedroom she was not sure she could afford the rent on for a single night. The sheets were some absurd thread count. There were flowers on the bedside table, fresh, white, something she didn't recognize. A woman named Rosa, who was maybe 50 and had eyes that missed nothing, had brought her a tray of food around 9. Soup, bread, a small glass of wine. Rosa had set it down, patted Elena's shoulder once like she was reassuring a child about her first night at summer camp, and left without a word. Elena had eaten 3 bites of the soup and then sat on the edge of the bed in a bathrobe that cost more than her couch and tried to understand what she had done. Her phone was on the dresser. She had 7 missed calls, 3 from her mother, 2 from her best friend Priya, 1 from a number she didn't recognize, 1 from Daniel. She didn't open them. Around 2 in the morning, there was a soft knock at her door. She pulled the robe tighter and opened it. Rosa was standing in the hallway. Rosa was holding a small glass bowl. Inside the bowl, swimming in peaceful circles, was a very small, very orange goldfish. "Miss Carter," Rosa said, in a voice that was not unkind, "someone sent a gentleman to your apartment. He brought your fish." "Oh. Do you want him in here with you, or in the hall?" In here, please." "All right, dear." Rosa set the bowl on the dresser, gave Elena another one of those careful, assessing looks, and said very quietly, "He is not a bad man, Miss Carter, but he is not a good man. You have been told this, I think." "I have." "Good." Rosa nodded. "Good night." She closed the door. Elena stood in the middle of the room, in the silence, with her grandmother's ring in its velvet box on the bedside table and a goldfish named Herbert swimming in peaceful circles across the room. She put her hands over her face and let out one shaky laugh that was mostly air. She was out of her depth. She was so far out of her depth that she couldn't see the shore anymore. But she had stopped shaking. Morning came thin and gray and wet. The rain had finally stopped, though the sky had not cleared and the city looked washed out and new. Elena was woken at 6 by a knock. By the time she'd put on the only reasonable clothes she had, jeans, a sweater, boots still damp from yesterday, Rosa was at the door with breakfast and a note. "Study, 7 a.m. Don't be late. V. She ate what she could, which was coffee. At 6:59, she was standing outside the study. At 7, Adrian Voss opened the door. He was already dressed. Another dark suit, this one with a collarless shirt under it, his hair slightly damp. And if he had slept at all, there was no evidence of it on his face. Come in. She came in. The study was a large room lined in bookshelves, with a fireplace, 2 chairs, and a mirror on the far wall, full-length, antique, set into the paneling. Stand in front of the mirror, please, she went. Look at yourself. She did. She looked tired and pale and small. He stood behind her, not close, his reflection a dark shape over her shoulder. Tell me what you see. A mess. No. Be specific. She took a breath. I see a woman who's been crying, whose clothes are wrong for this room, whose posture is bad. What else? I don't know. You're looking down. I'm not. You are. Your chin is down. Your eyes are up to meet mine in the glass, but your chin is down. Do you know what that does? It tells every person in the room they're taller than you, even the short ones, even the ones who aren't. It tells them you expect them to be taller. Chin up, not high, not aggressive, just level. There. She lifted her chin. He was right. It changed everything. Again, tell me what you see. A little less of a mess. A dry sound, almost a laugh. Progress. He stepped beside her and turned to face her in the mirror. She could see both of them now, side by side. Him in a suit that made her look like a house guest in her own body. Her in a sweater she'd owned since graduate school. Miss Carter. Elena. Before we start, there's something you need to understand. I am not going to teach you to be someone else. No, there's no time, and there's no point. Daniel Prescott fell in love with you once, which means the woman in that mirror has everything she needs already. What I'm going to do is teach you to stop apologizing for her. For the next 2 weeks, we are going to strip away every habit you have that begins with sorry, every flinch, every half second where you check the room before you speak, every sentence that ends in a question when it shouldn't, everything you do to make yourself smaller for people who should be looking up at you. And when I'm finished, when you walk into that ballroom on Saturday of week 2, you will not be a different woman. You will be the same woman, finally allowed to take up the space she deserves. Do you understand me? Yes. Good. Then let's begin. They began with her walk. He made her cross the room 15 times, and each time he told her something different. Shoulders, hips, the angle of her arms. Don't swing your hands like you're trying to convince someone of something, Miss Carter. You're not on trial. Stop gripping your own wrist. Yes, you are. You're doing it right now. Why are you doing it? I don't know. Find out. They worked for 2 hours. By 9, she wanted to cry. By 10, she wanted to hit him. By 11, she had stopped gripping her own wrist. At 11:15, Rosa brought in a tray of tea. Adrian poured it himself. 1 cup for Elena, 1 for him. She was startled enough that she almost said thank you too quickly, and he caught her before the word got out. No. No? Don't thank me for pouring tea. It isn't a favor. It's a cup of tea. Thanking someone for courtesy teaches them that courtesy is rare. Nod. Make eye contact. Take the cup. That's enough. She nodded, took the cup, made eye contact. He almost smiled again. Almost. Better. They drank the tea in silence for a moment. Mr. Voss. Adrian. Adrian. Yes. Can I ask you something? You can. Last night. Why did you say yes? You said you'd tell me this morning. He looked into his cup for a long second. She had the feeling, not for the last time in the next 14 days, that he was deciding precisely how much of the truth to tell her. He was a man who, she suspected, knew 1,000 ways to tell half a truth without ever technically lying. Your story, he said finally, was not the story I was expecting when you sat down. What were you expecting? Money, revenge, hurt feelings, a husband, something operatic. Women who come to see me almost always want something operatic. And I didn't. You wanted to not disappear, that is, he considered the word, Unusual. Is that why you said yes? No? Then, I said yes, Elena, because I recognized you. She looked at him. I don't understand. I know, he said quietly. That's all right. You will. He set down his cup and stood and brushed an invisible speck from his sleeve, and just like that, the conversation was over. He was at the mirror again, gesturing for her to join him, asking her now how she held her jaw when she was nervous, and whether she'd like to know what it told other people. The rain started again outside, soft against the windows. On the dresser in the East guest suite, in a small glass bowl, a goldfish named Herbert swam in quiet circles, undisturbed by any of it. And in the study, in front of a mirror that had watched many people become other versions of themselves, Elena Carter lifted her chin, unclenched her left hand, and took her first real step into Adrian Voss's world. She did not yet know that somewhere across the city, in a bright house on a hill that had never seen a day of bad weather, Daniel Prescott was standing in front of another mirror, letting his tailor adjust the shoulders of a wedding jacket, laughing at something his best man had said, and that his laughter would not last the week. She did not yet know that her grandmother's ring, still in its velvet box on her bedside table, would be worn on her hand again before this was over, but not for any of the reasons she had once imagined. She did not yet know very much at all. She was learning. By the end of the third day, Elena Carter had developed calluses on her feet in places she hadn't known feet could develop calluses. Adrian had her walking in heels across marble, across hardwood, across a narrow strip of red carpet he'd had laid down in the long hallway between the study and the dining room. And every time she wobbled, he said nothing, which was somehow worse than if he'd corrected her. He just waited until she straightened out and did it again. The problem isn't your feet, he said on the morning of the fourth day. They were in the dining room, an enormous space with a table long enough to seat 20, where Rosa had been told to set a single place at one end and a single place at the other. Your feet are fine. The problem is you walk as though you're expecting someone to step in front of you. I'm not. You are. You walk defensively. You walk as though your right of way is something that might be taken. I want you to do something for me today, Elena. I want you to walk through this house as though everyone in it works for you. Everyone in it does work for you. Then imagine I gave them to you for the afternoon. She almost laughed. She caught it before it got out. He noticed. He noticed everything. What? Nothing. Say it. It just sounds like something a man would say. He raised one eyebrow. Meaning it's easy to walk like you own the room when you own the room. I don't own anything, Adrian. I rent a one-bedroom above a laundromat, and my security deposit was my father's birthday money. He studied her for a long second. Then he did something she had not yet seen him do. He pulled out the chair at the head of the table. His chair, the one he sat in for breakfast and dinner, and every call he took at that end of the room, and gestured at it. Sit. I'm not going to sit in your chair. Elena. Adrian. Sit in the chair. She sat in the chair. He walked to the other end of the table, pulled out the chair there, and sat down himself. 20 feet of polished wood stretched between them. Somewhere, far away in the house, a door closed. Now, he said, I want you to tell me to bring you a glass of water. What? I'm your guest. You're the host. I want a glass of water. Tell me to get one. That's not how... Yes, it is. Do it. She looked at him down the length of the table. He was leaning back in his chair with his fingers laced together, watching her the way a chess player watches a piece he has already decided what to do with. Could you... No, start that sentence over. Adrian? Yes. There's water on the sideboard. He did not move. That's not what I asked for. It's what's there. For the first time in 4 days, something that was almost, but not quite, a real smile touched the edge of his mouth. It was there and gone so fast she half thought she'd imagined it. Better, he said. Try again, without softening it. Bring me a glass of water, Adrian. Good. Now you do it. He stood up without a word, walked to the sideboard, poured water from a crystal decanter into a glass, walked the full length of the table, and set it down in front of her. He did not look at her while he did it. He set the glass down the way a waiter sets a glass down, and then he walked back to his end and sat. Elena looked at the glass. I didn't think you'd actually do it. That's the point. I don't understand. He leaned forward on his forearms. Elena, listen to me. For 4 years, you lived with a man who told you what you deserved. He told you in 1,000 small ways, every day. He told you when he said he'd be home at 7 and came home at 10 and expected dinner to be warm. He told you when he introduced you to his friends as my girlfriend Elena and introduced his friends to you by their full names and titles. He told you every time he made a decision about the two of you and informed you of it afterward. And then at the end, he told you out loud, with words, what he had been telling you all along, that you were not enough. And you believed him, Elena, because you'd been practicing believing him for 4 years. She said nothing. I am not going to undo that in 14 days. I wouldn't try. What I can do is put a crack in it, one crack, just big enough that you can see through to the other side. And the other side, Elena, is that a man like Daniel Prescott does not get to tell a woman like you what she deserves. No man does. Not even me. She looked down at the glass. Drink the water. She drank the water. Good. Now get up and come here because we are not done with your walk. She rolled her eyes, and this time she did not bother to hide it. And as she stood up, she caught him, for 1/2 second, in the mirror above the sideboard, almost smiling. They worked until lunch. At 1 o'clock, Marco appeared in the doorway and said Adrian had a call he could not push. Adrian looked at Elena, looked at his watch, and said, 30 minutes. Eat something. Rosa will have it ready. He was gone through a side door, Marco a half step behind him before Elena could answer. Rosa had set up lunch in a smaller room off the kitchen, which Elena had by now come to understand was the one room in this enormous house where food actually happened, the way a kitchen is supposed to happen. The dining room was for theater. This room was for eating. Rosa brought her a plate of chicken with lemon and some kind of rice and a small glass of something pale that was either water with a slice of cucumber in it or an entire meal in liquid form. Elena couldn't tell. He called you Elena, Rosa said, setting down a second plate across from her. What? This morning, when he was talking about walking, I heard him through the door. He called you Elena. He's been calling me Elena for 2 days. No, dear. He has been calling you Miss Carter when he is thinking about you, and Elena by accident when he is not. Rosa said it like a weather report, like she was telling Elena it might drizzle in the afternoon. She sat down across the table, smoothed her apron, and began to eat. Rosa, have you worked for him a long time? 12 years. What was he like 12 years ago? Rosa chewed thoughtfully for a moment, tipped her head. Worse. Worse how? Harder, louder when he spoke at all. He did not sit down for meals. He ate standing up in the kitchen over the sink, like a man who expected to have to leave in the middle of every bite. I used to make him sandwiches because I was afraid a real plate would be wasted. He was not so calm then, Miss Carter. Calm came later, after the trouble. What was the trouble? Rosa looked up. Her eyes were very steady, very warm, and very closed. Eat your chicken, dear. Elena ate her chicken. After lunch, there was another hour of walking, and then an hour in the library with Adrian pointing at paintings and naming them, not asking her to memorize them. He made that clear, only asking her to remember which ones she liked. Because when someone at that wedding asks you about your last gallery opening, Elena, I would like you to be able to answer without flinching. Then there was an hour of what he called conversation practice, which turned out to be Adrian asking her rude questions and refusing to let her answer politely. Where do you summer? I don't summer anywhere. I teach summer school. Wrong, again. The Cape, usually. Too specific. If he knows the Cape, he'll ask where on the Cape. Somewhere vague, somewhere he can't verify. I was in Portugal last year. Better. Were you in Portugal last year? No, I was in Philadelphia for a teaching conference. Then never say Portugal unless someone else mentions Portugal first. The first rule of lying, Elena, is that you lie about geography other people know less than you do. The second rule is that you never volunteer a detail. Let them ask. Is that how you do it? I don't lie. You just said, I said I don't lie. I said I'm teaching you to. There's a difference. He was pacing slowly in front of the fireplace, one hand in his pocket. In my work, lying is an amateur's tool. Lies require memory. Lies require consistency. Lies fall apart. I don't lie, Elena. I let other people assume, and I don't correct them. It's cleaner. That sounds exhausting. It's restful, actually. Try it sometime. I'm a fifth grade teacher. If I let children assume things, the whole school burns down by Thursday. For the second time that day, the corner of his mouth moved. This one stayed longer. He did not look at her while it happened. All right, he said. Again, where do you summer? By the end of the day, she was so tired her hands shook again. Not from nerves this time, but from the effort of holding her shoulders down where he had put them. She fell asleep on a couch in the library around 9, and when she woke up at nearly 11, there was a cashmere throw over her that had not been there when she closed her eyes, and Adrian was across the room in an armchair, reading a file, as though putting a blanket on her had been someone else's job entirely, and he happened to be in the same room by accident. What time is it? Late. Go to bed. I will. I can see that you will not. Go to bed, Elena. I need to ask you something. He looked up. Set the file down on the arm of the chair. All right. She sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes. The throw slipped off her shoulders into her lap. When I walk into that wedding on Saturday, 6 days from now, what are they supposed to think happened between us? What's the story? There's no story. There has to be a story. The Prescotts are going to... Elena? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Listen, I've thought about this. There is no story that holds up to scrutiny in that room. Any story we tell, someone there knows enough to check. How we met, when, where, who introduced us. So we don't tell one. We give them nothing. Someone asks where we met, you say, I don't like to talk about it. Someone asks how long we've been together, you say, long enough. Someone asks what I do for work, you say, I don't discuss his business in rooms like this. And then you smile, and you drink your champagne, and you let them fill in the rest. That works? Elena, 90% of what people believe about other people is what they fill in when they don't have information. If you give them facts, they test the facts. If you give them silence, they invent something more interesting than anything you could have told them. By the end of the night, half that room will believe I'm the son of a European duke, and the other half will believe I run half the cocaine on the coast. And I promise you, both rumors will make Daniel Prescott more miserable than any real answer. Adrian. One of those things is almost true. He paused. Good night, Elena. She laughed, actually laughed, for the first time since she'd walked into the Halbrook Tower, and pulled the throw back around her shoulders and padded upstairs in her socks. She passed Marco on the landing. He was leaning against the banister, looking at his phone. He looked up as she went by and said, Night, ma'am. And she stopped, because it was the first time a grown man with a gun under his jacket had ever called her ma'am without irony. Good night, Marco. Sleep well. She slept like a brick. On day 7, which was the Friday before the wedding Friday, the rain finally stopped for real, and a pale, hard sunlight came through the long windows of the study and made everything look thinner and truer than it had all week. Adrian was at his desk, on the phone, speaking in a low voice in what Elena was almost sure was Portuguese. She had never heard him speak any other language. She stood in the doorway a moment watching him, the way his shoulders moved when he was concentrating, the way he held the phone not to his ear but a half-inch away, as if whoever he was talking to was not to be trusted with the full volume of his attention. He saw her. He said 3 more words, clipped into the receiver, and hung up. You're early. By 5 minutes. That's early. She came in and sat down in one of the chairs in front of his desk, tucking her feet up under her. She had stopped apologizing for tucking her feet up under her around day 5, which he had noted without comment. Portuguese? Yes. You speak it well. I speak it badly, but the man I was speaking to speaks English worse, so he never notices. Who was he? Adrian looked at her. Elena, some questions you don't ask in this house. Sorry. Don't be sorry, just know. She nodded. A small silence. Outside, a gull called from the direction of the harbor, thin and far away. I had a dream about you last night, she said. She had not meant to say it. It came out before she could stop it, the way things do when you've slept 8 hours for the first time in 2 months, and your mouth is working faster than your judgment. Adrian's face did not change, but his eyes came up and stayed. Did you? I didn't mean, not like that. I didn't assume like that. Good. Though it's interesting you clarified. Oh, shut up. He smiled. This time it was a real smile, small and dry and surprisingly warm, and it transformed his face in a way she was not prepared for. She suddenly understood that the reason Adrian Voss did not smile was not because he couldn't. It was because he knew what it did. Tell me about the dream. It was stupid. Most dreams are. I dreamed I was late to the wedding, and you were there already, in the church, and Daniel was at the altar, and no one would let me in because I didn't have an invitation, even though I was the one you were waiting for. And I kept trying to explain and no one would listen. And then I looked down and I was in my teacher clothes, the corduroy skirt I wear on parent night, and I woke up. What? 2 things. Okay. He leaned back in his chair. First, the invitation is on the dresser in the blue room, sealed, with your name on it. You've known where it was for 6 days, so that isn't what the dream was about. What was it about? Second, you dreamed about being alone at that wedding, not about being there with the wrong man, not about being humiliated by the right man, about being turned away at the door. Elena, the thing you are most afraid of on Saturday is not Daniel Prescott. It's not his mother. It's not the 300 people in that ballroom. It's the possibility that you will get there and discover you still don't have a right to be in the room. She was quiet for a long moment. Yes, she said finally. Good. Good? Good that you know it. Now we can work on it. He stood up and came around the desk and held out his hand. She looked at the hand for a second and then put hers in it, the way a child takes an adult's hand to cross a street, and he pulled her to her feet. Then he did something that she would remember, later, as the first thing that truly scared her about him. He put one hand on her waist and one at the small of her back and pulled her, not gently, into the position of a dance. She stopped breathing. We haven't done this yet, he said, quiet, close enough that she could feel the words on the side of her face. And there will be a first dance at that wedding. There always is. I don't dance. You do now. I don't know how. Follow me. Don't look at your feet. Look at my collarbone. No, not my face, Elena. You're still new. Collarbone, there, and breathe. You are allowed to breathe. She breathed. He moved her in a slow circle across the rug. He danced the way he did everything else, carefully, efficiently, without a single wasted motion, and with absolute certainty that she was going to go wherever he decided she was going to go. She had been held before. She had been held by Daniel 1,000 times, in 1,000 dim rooms at 1,000 polite weddings. She had never, in her entire life, been held like this. Like the person holding her had decided that, for the next 3 minutes, nothing was going to happen to her that he didn't permit. It was not romantic. It was not yet. That was the confusing part. It was safe in a way she did not recognize. Adrian. Yes. You're good at this. I had to learn. When? A long time ago. Someone made me. Who? He did not answer for almost a full turn across the rug. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. A woman I wanted to impress. Did it work? No. I'm sorry. Don't be. She was smarter than I was at the time. It would have been a disaster. She laughed softly. Nose breath laughed. The way she did when she wasn't allowed to laugh out loud in a school meeting. And she felt his hand at her back tighten very slightly for just a second, and then relax again. And she did not know what that meant and did not ask. They danced for another minute in silence. Then there was a sound she would replay in her memory for the rest of her life. It was a door opening somewhere in the house, and then a voice, Marco's, tight and fast. Boss? Adrian let go of her and turned in one movement, so sharply she almost fell. What? Back hallway, now. Adrian looked at Elena for 1/2 second. His face had gone completely still, the way a pond goes still before a storm, and she understood for the first time that everything she had seen of him in 7 days had been the version of him that was trying to be gentle with her. Stay here, he said. Close the door. Don't open it for anyone but me or Rosa. Adrian, Elena, do what I said. He went. She closed the door. She stood in the middle of the study for a long time with her hands pressed flat against the wood. She could hear nothing. She could hear less than nothing. Rich people's houses were built to swallow sound, and the only thing she could hear was the blood in her ears and her own breathing, which had gone shallow and fast. She did not hear the gunshot. There may not have been one. She heard at one point a man shouting, not Adrian, and then she heard a single loud sound that might have been a door, might have been a hand hitting a wall, and then silence again. 20 minutes? 25. 30. She sat in one of the chairs and wrapped her arms around her knees and thought, I could leave. Right now. The front door is 2 halls away. I could leave. She did not leave. At something like 35 minutes, she heard footsteps in the corridor. Light steps. Adrian's. The door opened. He was not in his suit jacket anymore. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbows. There was a small spray of something dark across his cuff. Not blood, or at least not very much blood, or perhaps not his blood. And his hair was a little less perfect than it had been 35 minutes ago. His hands, when he set them on the desk in front of her, were clean. He had washed them recently. She could smell the soap. He did not sit down. I want you to know something, he said. His voice was exactly as calm as it had been when he'd asked her about her dream. Okay. The man who was in my house was someone I have known for many years. He has worked in my organization for most of that time. I trusted him in a certain limited way. I had reasons to believe he was going to do something stupid. Today he did it. He is now going to leave my city by the end of the day, and I am never going to see him again. Nothing has happened to him that will be in a newspaper. Nothing has happened to anyone's family. Nothing has happened to anyone that wasn't a choice they made themselves. Do you understand me? Yes. Good. The second thing, I am not going to lie to you, Elena. Not about this. You didn't hear anything in this house, but if you had, what you would have heard was me being the man I told you I was on the first day. The man Sofia Valdez doesn't know. The man Rosa does. That man is not a performance. That man is not a costume. He is who I actually am, and the man in the study with you, dancing to no music, is the version of him that you have invited me to rent out for 2 weeks and then return. Adrian, let me finish. She let him finish. If at any point between now and Saturday you decide that this was not what you bargained for, I will have Marco drive you home. I will pay your rent through the end of the year. Your grandmother's ring stays yours. The wedding goes on without me, and you do not attend. You go back to your 5th grade and you forget this house existed. No one will bother you. No one will know. That offer expires Saturday morning at 7 o'clock. After that, we walk into the Ashford estate together and you will not be able to take any of this back. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Well? Yes. Then take the rest of the day. Don't make the decision now. Make it tomorrow. He turned to leave. Adrian. He stopped. Who was he? A long pause. A man named Luis Bento. He has been skimming for me for about a year. Not very much, relative to the whole, but enough. The concerning thing, Elena, was not the skim. The concerning thing was who he was selling the information to. He was selling to a competitor. That competitor has been watching me. Longer than I realized, longer than Marco realized, and Marco realizes most things. What does that mean for you? It means there are people who have been waiting for me to do something careless. And this week, for the first time in a very long time, I have done something careless. What did you do carelessly? He looked at her. His face had softened again, just slightly, the way it had when he'd put the throw on her the night before. I said yes to a schoolteacher in a wet coat. He left the room and closed the door very quietly behind him. Elena sat in that room for a long time. When she finally went up to her suite, there was a man she did not recognize standing at the end of the hallway with his hands folded in front of him. He was not Marco. He was older, gray, with a small scar on one cheek and the stillness of someone who had learned it on purpose. He nodded at her when she passed and said, "Ma'am," and did not move. She understood without being told that he was there because she was. Inside the blue room, Herbert the goldfish was swimming in slow, patient circles. A new bowl, bigger than the first one, an actual aquarium light humming low over the top of it. Rosa had clearly taken a side. Elena sat on the edge of the bed and looked at her hands. She did not cry. She thought she ought to be crying. Something in her had decided, without consulting the rest of her, that she was past the point in her life where crying was a useful tool, and she found herself oddly calm. She had come into this house a week ago with mascara smudged under her left eye, a velvet ring box, and a plan to survive one afternoon. She had, since then, watched a man she was supposed to be afraid of become, almost accidentally, someone she was not afraid of. She had watched him put a blanket on her while she slept. She had watched him pour her a glass of water from 20 feet away. She had danced with him, and she admitted it to herself only because no one else was in the room. She had wanted the song to be longer. And then she had watched him walk out of a room, and she was now almost certain, do something to a man named Luis Bento that she would never hear about. Those were the same person. Both of those things were the same person. That was the part she had to make peace with, if she was going to make peace with any of it. She did not call a cab. She did not pack her bag. Around 6 that evening, she went downstairs. The house was very quiet. Rosa was in the kitchen cutting something. Marco was on the back porch on the phone. Adrian was in the study again, at his desk, where he appeared to do everything, including, she suspected, sleep. He looked up when she came in. The cuff of his shirt had been changed. His hair had been fixed. He looked like the same man she had danced with, and only slightly not. "I want to keep going," she said. He set down his pen. He did not say anything for a moment. "Are you sure?" "No." "Good. If you were sure, I wouldn't believe you." "I'm sure enough." "All right." He nodded once. "Come in. Sit down. We have 5 days left and a great deal of work to do." "Adrian?" "Yes?" "Tell me about the woman." "What woman?" "The one who made you learn to dance." He looked at her. He looked at her for long enough that she began to think he was not going to answer, and then he stood and walked to the sideboard and poured 2 glasses of something from a decanter. Not scotch, this time, something lighter, and brought one to her and sat down in the chair across from her, not at his desk. He sat like a man who was about to tell a story he had not told in a long time and was not certain he still remembered all the words for. "Her name was Mariana," he said. "She was a year older than I was. She worked at the restaurant where I ate lunch every day when I was 22. Her uncle owned it. She taught me to dance because I was going to her cousin's wedding, and her mother had made her promise not to let me humiliate the family." "What happened to her?" "Nothing, for a while. We were together for 2 years. She wanted to go to medical school. She did. She went. I was already doing what I was doing. I didn't go with her. I told myself I'd follow later. I never did." "Do you still?" "She's married. 2 children. She lives in Lisbon. She works at a hospital. I have not spoken to her in 15 years, and I don't intend to." He turned the glass slowly in his hand. "She is the reason I know how to dance, and she is the reason I know what it costs to love a man who does what I do. She got out in time. I was glad then. I'm glad now." "That's a sad story." "It's not a sad story, Elena. It's the only story I have with a happy ending." She did not know what to say to that. She took a sip of the drink. It was some kind of pear brandy, she thought, sweet and sharp, and it made her eyes water. "Adrian." "Why did you tell me that?" He looked at her for a long moment over the rim of his own glass. "Because tomorrow I am going to teach you how to walk into a room with me without flinching when people stare. And I thought, before we started, you ought to know who you were walking in with." He set his glass down and stood. The moment was over. "Dinner in an hour," he said. "Wear whatever you want. Rosa bought you a pair of heels. They're in the hall closet. Don't put them on yet. I want to see your feet healed before Saturday." He walked out of the study. Elena sat in the chair for a while and finished her drink. The sun had started to set outside, late autumn dark already falling over the harbor, and the light in the study had gone amber and low. She thought about Mariana in Lisbon. She thought about Tomas Valdez and his daughter's bicycle. She thought about the man named Luis Bento, somewhere in a car on an interstate right now, driving away from this city with his life. She thought, for the first time in 2 months, not about Daniel Prescott. When she went upstairs, the man with the scar was still in the hallway, still standing with his hands folded. This time, when she passed, she said, "Good night, sir," and watched his face do something slow and surprised and almost grateful, as though no one in his life had said sir to him for a long time. "Good night, ma'am," he said. She closed the door behind her. Herbert the goldfish kept swimming. Outside, the city settled into another cold, clear evening, and somewhere on a hill on the other side of it, in a house where nothing bad had ever happened, Daniel Prescott was being fitted for cufflinks, and his mother was double-checking the seating chart, and his future wife was laughing at something about the band, and not one of them knew yet that in 5 days, the woman they had all agreed to forget would be walking through their doors with a man whose name none of them would be able to pronounce. In the study downstairs, Adrian Voss stood at the window and watched the harbor lights come on, one by one, the way he had the night this began. He was thinking about Mariana, which he had not allowed himself to do in many years. He was thinking about Luis Bento, which he would not allow himself to do after tonight. He was thinking most of all about a fifth-grade teacher upstairs who had, that morning, danced with him across a rug to no music, and let her hand rest against the back of his neck for 1/2 second longer than she had needed to. He had been telling himself all week that this was a favor, a short arrangement, a thing that would be over on Saturday night, and after which he would send a woman home in a car and close a door and never open it again. Standing at the window, watching his own reflection in the dark glass, Adrian Voss admitted quietly, to no one and to himself, that he had been lying. The rain had stopped. The harbor was calm. Somewhere far out in the bay, a ship's horn sounded once, long and low, and was answered by another, further out still. In his house, his people had been doubled. In his organization, men were being quietly asked questions. And in a room above his study, a woman he had known for 7 days was brushing her teeth and putting her grandmother's ring back in its velvet box and deciding, without telling him, that she was not going anywhere. The wedding was in 5 days. It was going to be the longest week of his life. The 5 days between that night and the morning of the wedding did not pass the way ordinary days pass. They compressed, the way a held breath compresses, until every hour of them felt thicker than the one before it. Elena woke on the 8th morning to find that her suitcase had been quietly moved from the blue room to a larger room at the far end of the east wing, and when she asked Rosa about it, Rosa only said, "He wanted you farther from the stairs," and went on folding napkins as though that explained anything at all. It did explain something, as it happened. Elena just didn't know what yet. Marco was at breakfast that morning, which was unusual. He was not an at-breakfast man. He stood in the corner near the coffee service with his jacket buttoned and his phone in his hand and did not eat. When Elena came down, he nodded at her in a way that was more formal than the nods he had given her all week, and it took her a moment to place why that felt wrong. Then she understood. He had been told she was now someone to be formal with, someone, perhaps, who warranted being protected. Adrian was not at breakfast. He was in his study. He had been in his study since 5 in the morning. Rosa said this the way she might say the weather is bad today, matter of fact, no editorial comment, and set down a plate of eggs in front of Elena. "Did he sleep?" "Not that I saw, Miss Carter." "Rosa." "Yes." "You can call me Elena. I've been here a week." Rosa looked at her with the same careful, assessing gaze she had given her on the first night. Rosa was a woman who measured people slowly. It was not rudeness. It was a professional habit, and Elena was beginning to understand that in a house like this one, the professional habits of the staff were how the house kept its secrets. "When Mr. Voss calls you Elena in front of me," Rosa said, "I will call you Elena." "He calls me Elena all the time." "Not yet in front of me, dear. Eat your eggs." Elena ate her eggs. The 8th day was the day everything changed in small, almost invisible ways. There was a second man in the hallway outside her door now, and a third at the front gate she had not seen yet but Marco mentioned in passing. There was a locksmith at the back door replacing something, though Elena was not allowed to see what. There was a car parked at the end of the street that had not been there before, with 2 men in it, and Elena noticed it when she went to the window and asked Marco about it, and Marco said, "Ours," without elaboration. And there was Adrian, who came out of his study at noon looking like a man who had slept exactly 45 minutes, and decided he didn't need any more, and who sat down across from her at lunch and said, without any greeting at all, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to think about it before you answer." "All right." "Has Daniel Prescott's father ever, to your knowledge, met you?" She blinked. "Richard?" "Yes. Several times." "How?" "Family dinners, 2 Christmases. Daniel's mother had a 50th birthday party at their house in Marblehead. I was there." "Did he ever ask you personal questions?" "His mother did. He asked me about my job. He asked if I was—" She paused. "If I was close with my parents. Anything about your family beyond that. He asked if I had siblings. I said no. He said only children always end up marrying into large families. And did he ever... Adrian stopped. Started again. Did he ever act strangely toward you? Stare too long? Seem to recognize you from somewhere? Anything like that? No, Adrian, what is this? He set down his fork. He hadn't been eating anyway. He had been pushing a piece of bread around his plate with the edge of a knife. Richard Prescott was acquainted with a man named Dominic Callahan a long time ago, before the Prescotts were the Prescotts. When Richard was just getting started in shipping, he ran some contracts for Callahan that he shouldn't have run. Nothing enormous by his standards today. Enough, then, to matter. Callahan was my partner. 11 years ago, Callahan decided to cut me out of the organization we had built. The method he chose was not clean. A number of people I cared about were involved. I responded, Callahan is no longer alive. Elena set her own fork down. Since then, Richard Prescott has been very careful not to exist in any world I exist in. He has made his money in legitimate shipping, donated to the right causes, raised his son to be the sort of young man who gets engaged to the daughter of a real estate family. He does nothing to attract my attention. He has spent 11 years making sure I would never have a reason to look in his direction. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Yes. When you and I walk into that wedding on Saturday night, Elena, his father is going to look at me, and for the first time in 11 years, he is going to understand that I have been looking back at him. She was quiet for a long moment. The eggs at breakfast sat in her stomach like stones. Adrian, did you know this before I walked into your office? No. When did you learn it? Marco mentioned the name that night after you left. I did not think it was relevant at the time. It would not have changed my answer. And now it is the only thing anyone in my organization is thinking about, me included. Is that why there's a man outside my door? Yes. Is it why there's a car at the end of the block? Yes. Adrian, is it why you moved my room? He looked up at her then. His eyes were tired. He had washed his face that morning, but he had not bothered with the fiction of a fresh shirt, and she saw, under the cuff, a small bandage on the inside of his left wrist she had not seen before. He did not try to hide it. He did not comment on it. He let her see it and let her decide whether she was going to ask about it, and she decided on that morning that she was not. Yes, he said, you think someone might come here. I think someone is considering it. There's a difference. Considering is not the same as deciding, but I have made a career, Elena, out of being harder to get to than the person is willing to pay to get to me. That's mostly it. That's most of what this work is. I raise the cost, and right now I am raising it everywhere. Adrian, I can go home. I don't have to be here. You do? Why? He exhaled. He picked his fork back up. He put it down again. Because the people who are considering it know you're here. Oh. Yes. How long have they known? Since the day after you arrived. Probably sooner. That's not possible. No one... Elena, you are a 5th grade teacher who has not shown up to work for a week. Your landlord has been paid by a real estate attorney who is technically a subsidiary of a holding company that is 5 layers deep, connected to me. Your mail was redirected by a service that shares a post office box with one of my accountants. It was not an invisible move. It was not meant to be. If I had tried to hide you, it would have looked like I had something to hide, so I did not try. You just said they've been watching you for a year. Yes. So they know I'm here. Yes. And if I went home now... He looked at her for a long moment. If you went home now, Elena, you would be a woman they believed had been close to me for a week and then left. That is a more dangerous thing to be in their minds than a woman who stays. Jesus. I'm sorry. You're sorry. I am. I would have told you the first night if I had known. I didn't. She pushed her plate away. Her hands had started doing the thing they had not done in 4 days. She was gripping her own wrist. She noticed it. She let go. Okay, she said. Okay? Okay. I stay. I wasn't going to go anyway. He almost said something. He stopped himself. Whatever it was, he put it in a drawer in his mind and closed the drawer, and when he spoke it was only, "Finish your lunch. I want to start fittings at 2. The dress for Saturday was delivered this morning." I didn't pick a dress. No, I did. Of course you did. You can reject it if you hate it. I won't hate it. You might. I won't. He stood up. He rested his hand for just a second on the back of her chair, not touching her, but near her shoulder, near enough that she could feel the heat of his palm through the linen. It was the first time he had been that near her without it being part of a lesson. Elena. Yes. If you want to call your mother, do it from the phone in the study. It's on a different line than the house phones. It doesn't go through our switchboard. Don't tell her you're here. Tell her you're in a hotel. Tell her you needed to think. Don't tell her anything else. Okay. And he hesitated. If she asks if you're all right, tell her yes. Am I all right? He looked down at her. Yes, he said. You are. I promise you. He left the room. She sat there for a long time. Rosa came in after a while and cleared the plates without asking, and on her way out she paused and set her hand on Elena's shoulder, the way she had on that first night, briefly and kindly. You are doing well, dear. I don't feel like I'm doing well. That is how you know. Rosa went. Elena called her mother. She told her she was in a hotel outside the city. She said she needed a few days. She said yes, she was eating. She said yes, she would be at the wedding. And no, it wasn't a mistake to go. And yes, she had a friend going with her. Her mother, who had raised her alone and who did not ask questions she wasn't ready to hear the answers to, said only, "All right, baby, call me when you're home," and hung up. Elena put down the phone and sat for a long time with her hand on it. The dress was hanging in the East Wing sitting room when she went up. It was in a garment bag so long it almost touched the floor, and Rosa was standing beside it the way a hospital nurse stands beside a bed, waiting. Adrian was on a chair by the window, reading something. He did not look up as Elena came in. He was trying, she understood, to make this less of a production than it was. Rosa. Yes, Mr. Voss. The dress, please. Rosa unzipped the garment bag slowly, as though she had done this many times in her life, and the dress came out of it the way a long sigh comes out of a room. It was a dark, dark green, so dark that in some lights it would read as black, and in other lights as the color of a forest at dusk, and the fabric was not the kind of fabric Elena knew the name of. It was cut long, to the floor, with a neckline that was higher than she had expected, and a back that was lower than she had expected. Not sexual. Severe. The kind of severe that made people not look away. There were no sequins, no beading, no jewelry attached to it. There was only the dress. Oh, Elena said. It was the only word she could find. Try it on. Adrian? What? I can't wear that. You can. You will. Go try it on. She went into the adjoining dressing room and Rosa came with her and helped her because the zipper was in a place Elena could not, on her own, have reached. When it was on, Rosa stepped back and looked at her, and Rosa, who had looked at her 20 times a day for a week and never said anything with her face, said something with her face now. Oh my, Rosa said softly. Oh, Elena. Oh. Is it bad? Look. Rosa turned her toward the mirror. Elena looked. The woman in the mirror was not a stranger. She was Elena, still, entirely. The same face, the same shoulders, the same line of her jaw that she had always thought too soft. But the green of the dress had made her skin look different. It had pulled some color up into her cheeks that she had not known was there. The cut of it had changed the shape of her neck. She was standing the way Adrian had made her stand all week, and the dress had locked it in, the way a cast locks a broken bone straight. She did not look like a fifth-grade teacher. She did not look either like the woman Daniel Prescott had left. She looked like a woman who, if Daniel Prescott had met her at a party on Saturday night, would have introduced himself twice and still not been sure she had caught his name. Rosa. Yes. Why is it not pretty? It isn't supposed to be pretty, dear. What is it supposed to be? Rosa took a long, slow breath. It is supposed to be correct. Elena looked at herself a moment longer. She did not understand what Rosa meant. And then, all at once, she did. She came out of the dressing room. Adrian was still on the chair by the window. He had set down whatever he was reading. He looked up as she came out. He looked. He did not say anything for a very long second. Then he stood up. Walk to the end of the room, he said. His voice had gone a little different, tighter, harder to read. She walked. She did it the way he had taught her, chin level, not too high, shoulders down, hands loose, not gripping her own wrist. She reached the far wall and turned and walked back, and at every point she felt the dress moving around her as though it had been tailored to her over weeks, which, she realized only now, it had been. "When?" she said. "When did you take my measurements?" "I didn't." "Then who?" "Rosa, the first night you were here." She stopped. She turned to Rosa. "You measured me in my sleep." "I am very quiet, dear." "Rosa." "I did not wake you." Elena laughed. She put her hand to her forehead and laughed, and once she had started, she could not stop for almost a full minute. She laughed until her eyes watered. She laughed until Rosa began to laugh too, small and surprised. And even Adrian's shoulders moved once, a real laugh he did not let out. It was the first time any of them had laughed in that house all week. When Elena finally caught her breath, she wiped her eyes and straightened, and she looked at Adrian and she said, "It's the right dress." "Yes," he said. "Thank you." "Don't thank me." I know. Don't thank you for courtesy. I know." "This isn't courtesy. You're still right not to thank me. I'll explain why some other time." He turned to Rosa. "That's enough for today. She's tired. Have it pressed and hung again tomorrow." Rosa nodded. She helped Elena out of the dress with the same quiet reverence she had used putting it on her. Elena went back to her room and sat on the edge of the bed in a bathrobe and looked at Herbert swimming in peaceful circles and thought, "My life is not my life anymore. My life has become someone else's novel." She did not know how she felt about that. She thought she felt good about it. That was the part that worried her. The 9th day was quieter. The 10th day was quieter still. Adrian kept her in the house. He did not take her out, not to a restaurant, not to a shop, not even onto the back porch. When she asked why, he said only, "Not until Saturday. We want their first look at you to be inside that ballroom," but she knew it was also the other thing. The thing neither of them said. They danced again on the 11th day, twice. Once in the morning, which was technical, and once in the evening, which was not. The evening dance happened after Rosa had gone to bed, and Marco had gone downstairs, and the study had the low amber light of lamps instead of the overhead chandelier. He had poured them both a small glass of the pear brandy, and they had been talking about nothing, about a book Elena had been trying to read since Tuesday and had not gotten past page 8 of, when he had stood up and held out his hand and she had taken it without asking why. There was still no music. He walked her slowly across the rug, a turn, another turn, and she rested her forehead against his collarbone this time, which he did not correct. He did not say anything at all for a long time. His hand at her waist was steady and flat and did not move. She could hear his breathing. She could feel the small thudding drum of his heart through the fabric of his shirt, not fast, not slow, only alive. "Adrian." "Is this still part of the training?" "No." "All right." "Elena." "Yes." "Don't ask me what it is yet. I don't know what it is. I don't know what I'm allowed to make it, given what my life is. Don't ask me tonight." "I won't." "Thank you." They finished the turn. He stepped back. He let her go. He walked to the window and stood with his back to her for a long moment, and she understood, watching him, that Adrian Voss was not a man who had been held in a long time either, that Mariana had been real and far back, and that everyone in the 15 years between Mariana and Elena had been the wrong person, or the right person at the wrong time, or no one at all, and that he had been, she now understood, a very lonely man for a very long time without ever having allowed himself to notice. She did not go to him at the window. That would have been a mistake. She said, "I'm going up," and he said, "Good night," and she went. The 12th day was the worst one because it was the day Marco came in at breakfast and pulled Adrian aside without a word, and the two of them spoke for 17 minutes in the back hall, and when Adrian came back, he did not sit down. He said, "I need to leave the house for a few hours," and Elena said, "Okay," and he said, "Carlos will be outside your door," and she said, "Okay," again, and he paused in the doorway and looked back at her. "Stay inside the house, Elena. Not on the porch, not in the garden, inside. If anyone comes to the front door, Rosa handles it. If anyone comes to the back door, Rosa handles it. You don't answer. You don't look out a window. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Promise me." I promise you. He left. He was gone for 6 hours. When he came back, he was bruised along the line of his cheekbone. Not badly, a reddening that would be purple by morning, and his right knuckles were wrapped in a clean white bandage. He said nothing about any of it. He ate dinner, he drank a glass of wine. He asked her about her day as though he were a husband who had come home from an office job. She played along. Rosa played along. Marco, at the corner of the kitchen, pretended to be absorbed in his phone. After dinner, Adrian went up to his office on the second floor. He had two, one for work in the traditional sense, and one for the other kind of work, and he was in there until nearly midnight. When Elena passed the door on her way to bed, the door was cracked. She saw him at his desk with his sleeves rolled up, writing something on a legal pad by hand, and she saw, for the first time, what he looked like when no one was performing anywhere near him. He looked old. He looked like a man who had been awake for a very long time. She did not knock. She went to her room. She did not sleep. She heard his door close, later, around 1, and his footsteps on the stairs toward his own bedroom at the opposite end of the hall, and then silence. On the 13th day, the day before the wedding, there was no training. There were no walks. There were no conversations about where one summered. Adrian did not come downstairs until almost noon, and when he did, he found Elena on the back porch, Marco having decided quietly that they could all use the air, and having positioned two men where no one would see them unless they were looking. And he sat down in the chair beside her without speaking. They sat there for a while. "Tomorrow," he said eventually. "Tomorrow. The ceremony is at 4. The reception is at 6. The cocktail hour is between them. We will arrive at the beginning of the cocktail hour, not the ceremony. I have no interest in watching Daniel Prescott get married. I have an interest in watching him realize, in front of 300 people, that the first woman he picked to spend his life with is a person he did not know how to see. Okay, we will stay exactly as long as it takes to make the point. Not a minute longer. When I tell you it is time to leave, Elena, we leave. Without a goodbye. Without a dance, without finishing a drink. Is that clear?" "Yes." "Because..." He stopped, started again. "Because I do not want to be in a room with 300 people on a night like this night, and I am doing it only because you asked me to. I will stay as long as you need me to stay. I will not stay 1 minute longer than that. I understand." "Good." "Adrian." "Yes." "Has anything happened, today, that I should know?" He looked at her. "A man who works for Richard Prescott went to the pier this morning and asked a longshoreman whether I would be at the Ashford estate tomorrow night. The longshoreman, who is one of mine, said he had no information. The man accepted this and left and did not come back. I am telling you this because you asked. I am also telling you that it does not change the plan. It does not change anything. It is only a data point. Do you understand? Richard Prescott knows. Richard Prescott has suspected since yesterday. Now he has confirmed. It changes what the night will feel like for him. It does not change what it will feel like for you or for me." "Okay. Are you scared?" "Yes." "Good. You should be. But I want you to listen to me very carefully now, Elena." He turned in his chair so he was facing her. He did not touch her. He only looked at her, with the full attention he had given her exactly once before, on the first day, across his desk. "Tomorrow night, in that ballroom, you're going to see people you used to care about the opinion of, and you're going to see them in a way you have never seen them before. You're going to see how they move when I walk into a room. You're going to see how their mouths tighten, how they look at each other, how they hesitate before they speak. You are going to see it, and you are going to understand, in a way you cannot understand from my saying it now, that they never deserved your nervousness. You were not nervous because they were important, Elena. You were nervous because you had agreed to call them important. That's all. It was a deal you made a long time ago, and tomorrow night you're going to watch that deal dissolve in a room full of witnesses. Bore eskem tit. She looked at him. What if I cry? You won't. But what if I do? Then you cry. And anyone who mistakes it for weakness, Elena, has never stood in front of a woman who was crying because she was finally angry. And those are the only tears you are going to have to offer anyone in that room. Adrian. Yes. I'm glad it was you. He did not answer that. He looked out at the garden for a long time. A bird landed on the edge of the fountain and looked at them and left. Come inside, he said finally. Rosa is making something. You should eat. They went inside. That night, Elena could not sleep. She got up at 2. She put on her robe. She walked quietly down the hall in her bare feet, past Carlos at the end of the corridor, who nodded at her and did not ask where she was going. She walked down the stairs. She walked to the study. The light was on. The door was open. Adrian was sitting in the armchair by the fireplace, in shirt sleeves, reading a small book with a cracked spine. He looked up when she came in. He did not seem surprised. I couldn't sleep, she said. Neither could I. She came in and sat down in the other chair. She did not say anything for a while. He did not either. He set the book face down on the arm of his chair, open to the page he had been reading, and waited. Adrian. Tell me one thing about you I don't know. Which one? Anyone. He thought about it. I have a brother. You have a brother. I have a younger brother. He is a dentist in San Diego. He has 3 children. None of them know what I do. He knows. He chose many years ago to know and not to know at the same time. We talk on the phone twice a year. I have never met his children. I have pictures of them in a drawer in this house. I have never put them on the wall. I never will. That is the last person in the world who is mine, Elena, and it is the only way I have been able to keep him. She was very quiet. Thank you for telling me. I don't know why I did. I think you do. He looked at her. He looked at her for a long time. The fire had burned down to embers and the room was warm and low and orange. And Elena Carter, 5th grade teacher, realized that for the first time in 8 years she was sitting in a room with a man and not counting the minutes until she could be alone again. Go to bed, Elena. All right. I mean it. I know you do. She stood. She walked to the door. She paused. She turned back. Adrian. Yes. If anything happens tomorrow, I need you to know that... Don't. Let me finish. No. Adrian? No, Elena. Whatever you are about to say it on Sunday, say it on Monday, say it a month from now, not tonight. I cannot hear it tonight and do what I have to do tomorrow. Do you understand me? She looked at him. Yes. Good night. Good night. She went up to her room. She lay down in the dark. Herbert the goldfish circled once, twice, and settled. Outside her window, the city had gone to bed, and the harbor light stretched out like a string of quiet yellow beads. And somewhere in a house on a hill, Daniel Prescott was sleeping the easy sleep of a man who believed tomorrow was his day. And in a room 100 feet away across a dark hall, Adrian Voss sat alone in his armchair with a book face down on the arm and did not read a single word of it for another hour. Elena slept a little. She dreamed this time of green fabric and of a slow turn across a rug and of a man standing with his back to a window. She did not dream of being turned away at any door. When she woke, the light at her window was the pale clear gold of a cloudless autumn morning, and Saturday had come. 10:04. Saturday came the way every wedding day and every wedding day story comes, too bright, too clean, too quiet. The sun was low and pale over the harbor when Elena woke, and there was a stillness in the house that she had not heard since she'd first walked into it. A stillness that had nothing to do with the hour, and everything to do with the fact that Adrian had given orders for the day, and orders in this house moved the air the way a tide moves sand. Rosa came in at 8 with coffee and a small plate of fruit and a single folded piece of paper. She set all 3 on the bedside table without saying anything, and she drew the curtains and she smoothed an invisible wrinkle in the foot of the bedspread, and then she looked at Elena for a long, careful second, the way a mother looks at a daughter about to be married, which, the irony did not escape either of them, though neither of them said it aloud. He has a long day ahead of him, Elena, Rosa said. She did not call her Miss Carter anymore. She had stopped the day before quietly, without either of them remarking on it. Go easy with him this morning. Is he all right? He is the same. But the day is not the same, you understand. Yes. Good. Eat the fruit. Rosa went. Elena unfolded the paper. It was a handwritten note on heavy cream stock, 3 lines in a hand she now recognized as Adrian's, small and tight, and leaning slightly to the right, hair and face at 11. The woman knows what I want. Don't argue with her. She's the best there is. I'll come to you at 4. She smiled a little, in spite of herself. Don't argue with her. He had addressed her note the way he would have addressed an order to one of his men, and it was maybe the most honest thing about their entire arrangement that he had not bothered to soften it. She drank her coffee. She ate the fruit. At 11, a woman named Katerina came up to the East Wing. She was thin and 40 and severe and did not waste words. She sat Elena down in front of a ring of lights and began to work on her face, and Elena, who had been dreading this for a week, who had been picturing something elaborate and heavy and armor-like, a mask of a woman she would not recognize, discovered that Katerina's entire project seemed to be to make her look like herself, but as if she had slept for 9 hours and been loved by someone her whole life. "You are not going to a costume party," Katerina said at one point, not looking at Elena, working on the line of her cheek with a brush. "You're going to a wedding where everyone is wearing the same face. Yours is to be the face that is not wearing a face." "That makes no sense." "It will when we are finished." The hair took longer than the makeup. Katerina did not put it up. She did not, Elena realized afterward, do anything dramatic at all. She smoothed it, she trimmed 2 wispy pieces at the front that had been bothering Elena for years, and she set the whole thing at a very slight angle that made Elena's neck look about a half-inch longer than it was. It was the kind of work you only noticed when it stopped. When Katerina finally lowered her hands, Elena looked in the mirror and could not point to a single thing that was different, and also could not recognize herself. "There," Katerina said, "that is the face for tonight. Thank you. Do not thank me. It is what I do." At 2:30, Rosa brought up the dress and hung it on the back of the dressing room door, and for an hour Elena sat on the edge of the bed in a robe and did not move. She did not do anything. She looked at the dress, and she looked at Herbert, and she looked at her hands. She thought about being 8 years old and watching her mother get ready for her only date after the divorce. How her mother had sat in the exact same posture, knees together, hands in lap, robe open just at the collar, and had looked at herself in the mirror for a long time before she had stood up. Her mother had not gone out with that man again. Elena, 31 years old, was going to a wedding with a man she had known for 13 days. That was a thing to sit with. At 4, there was a single knock at her door. "Come in." Adrian came in. He was in black. Everything was black. The suit was black, and the shirt was black, and the tie was black, and the only thing on him that wasn't black was a thin silver pin in his lapel. Not jewelry exactly, not flashy, just a small worked thing that caught the light if you turned your head. His hair was combed back. He had shaved. There was the faint shadow of the bruise along his cheekbone, almost gone now, but he had done nothing to hide it, which was the choice of a man who knew he was about to walk into a room and wanted to leave one detail for people to whisper about. He stopped when he saw her. She was already in the dress. Rosa had helped her half an hour ago. She was standing near the window in the light, and she saw him see her, and she saw his face change, not openly, nothing so dramatic as that, only a small tightening at the corner of his mouth, a small pause in his breathing, a half-second where Adrian Voss forgot he was supposed to be giving instructions. "Elena, is it bad?" "No." "Is it good?" "Yes." "Well, don't sound so sure." He smiled. He really smiled, the full one, the one that belonged to a younger man in Lisbon 20 years ago who had made mistakes he had since spent a lifetime not repeating. And Elena, who had watched that smile happen only twice before, put it away in a mental drawer she had started keeping for the gestures of his she did not want to forget. "Come here," he said. She came. He lifted a small velvet box from his inside jacket pocket. Not her grandmother's. A different one. He did not open it dramatically. He opened it the way you open a drawer. Inside were a pair of simple old earrings. Emerald, not large. The settings were old gold, darkened a little with age, the stones smaller than she would have imagined. "These were my mother's," he said. "She died when I was 19. I have carried them for a long time. They are not on loan. I do not need them back. I am giving them to you because they go with the dress, and because I would like you to wear something of mine that is not a watch or a logo. If you do not want them, say so, and I will put them back in the drawer, and we will not speak of it." "Adrian?" "Yes." "I'll wear them." "Good." "I don't know how to say the right thing. There isn't a right thing. Put them in." She put them in. They were heavier than they looked. They changed something in the mirror when she turned her head, some small dark green to match the dress, an answering weight at the ears to match the weight of the fabric at the hem. She looked at herself in the dressing room mirror one more time, and Adrian came up behind her and did not touch her, but stood at her shoulder so that they were both in the glass together.
"There we are," he said quietly. "There we are. Ready? No. Good. Let's go."
The car was a black sedan, not long, not flashy. Marco drove. A second car trailed behind them, and a third had already gone ahead. Adrian sat beside her in the back and did not say anything for the first 10 minutes, and Elena, who had expected to be shaking by now, was surprised to find that she was not. She was calm. The calm was not natural. It was the calm of a woman who had spent 13 days being taken slowly apart and put slowly back together by a man who did not leave loose ends.
"Adrian,
Will you hold my hand?" He looked at her. He put his hand on top of hers on the seat between them. He did not lace his fingers through hers. He laid his hand over the back of hers, heavy and steady, and he left it there. "Breathe." "I am breathing." "Breathe slower." She breathed slower. The Ashford estate was 40 minutes outside the city, on a hill that had been groomed for 3 generations into the kind of place where nothing ever looked wrong. The main house was white with black shutters, enormous in an understated way, and the drive was lined with boxwoods and small twinkling lights that had been installed for the occasion. There were valets, there was a doorman, there was a small, tasteful sign directing guests to the ceremony site, which was behind the house, in a tented space on the lawn, where by now the vows had already been said, and the couple had already been pronounced, and the string quartet was wrapping up its third performance of the same 3 Pachelbel variations. Adrian's car did not stop at the main door. It went around to the side, a service drive Marco clearly already knew, and pulled up at a small entrance near the conservatory. The timing was not an accident. Adrian had arranged it so that they entered the reception not through the main hall, where everyone would see them all at once, but through a side corridor that emptied into the ballroom at its widest point. The point, he had explained to her 2 nights ago, was not to be announced. The point was to appear, to already be there, to be discovered, not introduced. "Ready," he said again. "No." "Good." He got out first. He came around and opened her door. She took his hand and stepped out into the autumn evening, and the cool air hit her bare arms, and the gravel shifted under her heels, and she thought, "I have been in his world for 13 days, and this is the first time I have stepped out into the air on the arm of a man who is not my ex-fiancé since I was 25 years old." They walked in. The corridor was narrow and carpeted. A young man in a waiter's jacket held the door open for them at the far end. He did not recognize Adrian by name. He did not have to. He recognized Adrian by posture, which was the way a certain kind of person was always recognized in this kind of house. They stepped through. The ballroom opened up around them. It was everything Elena had imagined, and more, and worse, and louder. 3 enormous chandeliers, a band setting up on a low stage, long tables with white linen and silver and candles, a bar at each end already busy, the clink of glass and ice. 300 people, the smell of roses and expensive cologne, and the faint sugar heat of an almost wedding cake that had been rolled out too early. It was, Elena understood immediately, the kind of room she used to feel small in, the kind of room that was designed to make her feel small in it. And the room, for 1 second, noticed them. 1 second. That was all. A woman near the bar turned her head a quarter inch. A man holding a cocktail paused between sip and swallow. A cluster of cousins near the 3rd chandelier stopped whatever they had been laughing about. None of it was dramatic. None of it was a record scratch. It was the small, quiet, physical tell of a crowd registering a disturbance. And the disturbance was Adrian Voss walking into the Ashford ballroom with a dark green dress on his left arm. Adrian did not look at the room. He walked straight ahead toward the bar on the far end. Not slowly, not quickly, the way a man crosses a room he has crossed 100 times, and Elena walked with him, chin level, one hand loose on his sleeve, and somewhere in her peripheral vision she saw Richard Prescott, Daniel's father, in the far corner with 2 men she did not know, turn his head and then stop turning, and then set his glass down on a small round table. Adrian had seen him. Of course he had. Adrian had seen him before he had seen Adrian. He did not acknowledge him. They reached the bar. 2, he said to the bartender. Champagne. The bartender poured 2. Adrian handed one to Elena. He lifted his a quarter inch without looking at her and said so quietly she almost didn't catch it. "You have not smiled since we walked in. It is time to smile." "I forgot." "Don't forget small, don't bare your teeth, just the corners, as though I have said something only half funny. There. Good. Now take a sip. Not a big sip. Good." She took a sip. She was smiling. Across the room, the first confused face appeared. It was a blonde woman in her 40s whom Elena recognized immediately as Marisol Halloran, an old friend of Daniel's mother's who had twice asked Elena at Christmas dinner whether she and Daniel were ever going to commit, each time in front of the entire family, each time laughing. Marisol Halloran was now looking at her across 30 feet of carpet, with her cocktail halfway to her mouth, and Elena, who had been terrified of this woman for 4 Christmases running, watched her try to work out what was happening and saw her fail. That was the moment Elena realized she was going to be all right. She almost laughed. "Don't laugh." "I'm not." "You want to." "I do." "Wait until we are in the car." "Okay." Good. They moved slowly, the length of the room. They did not cross it in one sweep. Adrian paused to look at a painting on one wall. It was an actual good painting, she noticed, not a reproduction, and she paused with him. They reached a small knot of people near the 4th chandelier, and an older man in a cream blazer said, "Voss?" Like a question and a greeting and a warning all at once, and Adrian said, "Wexler, your knee any better?" And the older man blinked and said, "It is, thank you." And Adrian kept walking. He did not introduce her. He did not need to. They reached a small alcove near one of the tall windows. Adrian stopped there. It was, she realized, deliberate. A spot with its back to no one. A clear sight line to both exits. A table just near enough that he could set down a glass without turning his shoulder away from the door. It was where he had decided, days ago, they would stand. And that was where Daniel Prescott found her. She had been waiting for it. She had been picturing it for 2 weeks, had rehearsed it in front of a mirror, had pictured 15 versions of him walking across the room in 15 different expressions, and none of the versions she had imagined matched the one that actually arrived. Daniel Prescott, 34 years old, son of Richard Prescott, the groom, came across that ballroom toward her with his jacket buttoned wrong and his face the wrong color, and he looked, for the first time since Elena had known him, like a boy. "Elena." "Daniel." He stopped 2 feet away. He did not know where to put his hands. He put them in his pockets and took them back out and held them at his sides. He looked at Adrian. He looked at Elena. He looked at Adrian again. He did not seem to be able to make his face do one thing. Can we talk? For a minute." "We are talking," Elena said. It was not a line she had rehearsed. It came out by itself. She watched Daniel blink as though she had slapped him. "Privately?" "No." "Elena." "I said no, Daniel." Adrian had not moved. He was standing at her shoulder exactly the way he had been standing a second ago, a champagne glass in his hand, his face completely blank. The blankness, Elena understood, was worse than any expression would have been. It was the blankness of a man who had not decided yet whether he was going to speak at all. Daniel looked at him again. "I don't think we've met," Daniel said. His voice was thin. He was trying. "No," Adrian said. That was all he said. "No." One word, flat, polite on the surface, and a closed door underneath. Daniel waited for more, and there was no more. I just wanted to say I'm glad you came." "Thank you, Daniel." "I didn't think you would." "I know you didn't." "Elena, Daniel." "Yes." She looked at him. She looked at him the way Adrian had taught her to look at a room, level, chin steady, eyes not dropping to his tie or his hands or the floor or anywhere else. And for the first time in 4 years, she watched Daniel Prescott realize that he had been talking all this time to a woman whose gaze he had never once actually met. "I came because you've invited me," she said. "I came because I wanted to. You don't need to thank me for it. You don't need to explain anything. You don't need to apologize. You and I do not have anything left to say to each other that is worth saying in a ballroom on your wedding day. Elena, go enjoy your reception, Daniel. Please just go." It was not loud. She did not raise her voice. She did not have to. She had said it the way Adrian had said, 2 mornings ago, Bring me a glass of water, Adrian, without softening, without asking permission, without leaving any room under the word for it to be mistaken for a suggestion. And Daniel Prescott, who had in 4 years of their relationship never once heard Elena Carter use her own voice at him in that register, took half a step back as though he had bumped into something. He looked at Adrian one more time. Adrian looked back at him. The champagne glass in Adrian's hand had not moved a millimeter in 4 minutes. He had not spoken a second time. He did not have to. Right, Daniel said. Right. Right. He left. He walked the entire length of the ballroom to where Vivian Ashford, his new wife of 45 minutes, was standing with her mother and a small group of bridesmaids. And whatever he said when he reached them made all 4 women turn their heads in unison in the direction of Elena and Adrian. Adrian finally lifted the champagne glass and took a sip. "You're doing well," he said quietly. "My hands are shaking. Nobody can see them." "I can. I can too. That is not the same as nobody. Drink your champagne." She drank her champagne. They stayed for another 40 minutes. Richard Prescott came over once, about halfway through, with a tight smile and his wife on his arm. He said, "Mr. Voss, I hadn't expected you tonight." He said it very politely. He said it the way a man says something he has rehearsed in his head 10 times on the walk across a room. His wife, whose name was Candace, smiled the smile of a woman who did not know what was happening but had long ago learned to smile through not knowing. Adrian said, "Richard, Candace, it's been a long time." "It has. Your son looked well at the altar." "Thank you." "Congratulations on the match. The Ashford family is a fine one." "Yes. Elena is a friend. I am here as her guest." The word friend did something to Richard Prescott's face that Elena would think about for a long time afterward. It was, she thought, the sound of a man being told, "I am here not because I came for you, but because a person you once stepped on has walked back into your house by the front door, and the thing you should be afraid of is not me. It is her." Richard Prescott nodded. "Of course. Enjoy your evening. You as well." They moved on. Candace Prescott looked back at Elena once over her shoulder, and Elena, who had been called dear by Candace Prescott for 4 years at Thanksgiving dinners, watched her former future mother-in-law look at her as if she had never seen her before. The kiss came later. It was not planned. Adrian had not told her there would be one. They were standing near the window, and the band had started, and the first dance had come and gone. And Elena, who had known it would come and gone and had braced for it, and had been surprised to find that watching Daniel and Vivian dance had done nothing at all to her chest, had turned to Adrian and said quietly, "I'm ready to leave whenever you are." And Adrian had said, "Not yet. One more thing." And she had said, "What?" And he had looked at her, and he had said, "May I?" "May you what?" "Do you want me to ask it any more clearly?" "Oh." "We don't have to." "Will it matter?" "For the room." "For the room." "Yes." "For you." He paused. "Also yes." "Then yes." He did not lean in slowly. He was not a man who performed things. He tilted his head and kissed her once, briefly but not shortly, his hand going up to the side of her jaw to hold her there for exactly as long as he intended to hold her there. And Elena, who had kissed a man in public exactly twice in her life, and had both times felt as though she were watching herself from across a room, did not feel that way this time. She felt, for one very clear second, only the warmth of his palm on the side of her face, and the small sound of her own pulse, and the dim, distant realization that 300 people in a ballroom had all turned their heads at once, the way a flock of starlings turns at once, without discussion. He pulled back. He looked at her. She looked at him. "All right," he said, now we go. Now we go." They did not hurry. They did not need to. Adrian took her hand, not her arm, hand palm to palm, fingers loose, and he walked her across the ballroom at exactly the same pace they had walked across it an hour ago. And the crowd, which had parted for them on the way in out of curiosity, parted for them on the way out of something closer to awe. Marisol Halloran was no longer holding her cocktail. Candace Prescott was not looking at them. Daniel Prescott, Elena saw out of the very corner of her eye, was standing alone near the cake, his wife having gone somewhere else, and he was watching her leave with the look of a man who had just understood, too late, something about himself that he was never going to be able to ununderstand. They reached the side corridor. The young man in the waiter's jacket held the door again. They stepped out into the cool evening. Marco was already at the car. The engine was running. Adrian opened her door. She got in. He went around. He got in. Marco pulled smoothly away from the side of the house. The car rolled down the long drive between the boxwoods, under the little twinkling lights, and out onto the dark road. For almost a full minute, neither of them spoke. Then Elena started to laugh. It was not a delicate laugh. It was the kind of laugh that came up from the base of a person's spine, uncontrolled and inconvenient and almost painful. And it took her over, and she pressed her hand to her mouth and laughed into her fingers, and her shoulders shook. And Adrian, to her absolute shock, laughed too, a short, low, incredulous sound, as though he had not expected himself to laugh either, and was just as surprised as she was. "We did it," she said. "You did it. We did it. You did it, Elena." Oh my God, Daniel's face. His tie was crooked. His tie was crooked. His mother must have been frantic. She was. How do you know she was? I could see her across the room, Elena. She was frantic. She was approaching frantic before we even arrived. Did you see her look at the kiss? I did not look at her. I was busy. Adrian. Yes. Thank you. Elena, I know. Don't thank you. Not for courtesy. I am not thanking you for courtesy. I am thanking you for I know what you're thanking me for. Okay. You are welcome. She turned to look out the window. The lights of the road streamed past in long yellow ribbons. She was still laughing a little, smaller now, more like hiccups. Her hand was still in his on the seat between them. He had not let go. They rode for a while in the quiet. Adrian. Yes. What happens now? Now we go home. And then? He was quiet for a moment. And then I take you to dinner. Not tonight, tomorrow. A real dinner. I have been wanting to take you to a real dinner since the 4th day you were in my house, and I have not been able to because of what was going on. Tomorrow I will. Tomorrow we will go somewhere with bad lighting and good food, and we will talk about anything except this wedding and this ballroom and this night. Does that sound? And then the window of the car shattered. It happened so fast that Elena's brain did not process the sound before it processed the feeling. There was a hard, wet crack of glass and a hiss of air, and the car swerving, and the sound of a second, sharper crack from somewhere out in the dark. And Adrian, in one motion, shoved her down sideways so that her head was in his lap, and his body was over hers. And she heard Marco shouting something into the radio on the dash. And she heard the engine scream, and she felt the car skid and right itself and accelerate. And she heard Adrian say low and flat and quite close to her ear, "Stay down, Elena. Stay down. Stay. Don't move." Adrian, stay down. There was a third crack, fainter, further behind them. Then there was only the roar of the engine and the rhythm of the tires on pavement, and Adrian's hand, very steady, very heavy, pressed flat against the back of her head, holding her there. Not gently, because this was not a night for gentleness anymore. Somewhere in the dark behind them, headlights were swinging onto the road, one pair and then another, and then a third. And the third pair, she would learn later, was Adrian's. Adrian did not take his hand off her head for 9 miles. When he finally did, when the car had turned off onto a smaller road and then a smaller one, when the engine had slowed to something almost normal and Marco had said something quiet into the radio and gotten a quiet answer back, Adrian sat up slowly and looked down at her. His shirt, she saw then for the first time, had a dark wet line along the collarbone, small, no bigger than her thumbnail, but it was not champagne. He saw her see it. He closed his hand around her wrist. I'm fine. Adrian, I am fine, Elena. It is glass. It is not a wound. Listen to me. Okay. Breathe, she breathed. Good. They drove on through the dark. Not toward his house, not toward any house she knew. They turned and turned again and turned a third time. And when she lifted her head enough to look out the window, she did not recognize any of the streets. Adrian's hand was still on her wrist. His other hand, the one with the bruised knuckles from 4 days ago, was pressed to his own shoulder. Adrian, she said very quietly, they were waiting for us. Yes. They knew we were going to be there. Yes. They knew about me. Yes. Was it Richard Prescott? He looked at her.
His face was unreadable in the half-dark. "No," he said. "It was not Richard Prescott." "Then who?" "I will tell you at the safe house, Elena. Not in the car, not now. Hold on to me. Close your eyes. We will be there in 10 minutes. She held on to him. She closed her eyes.
The car drove on into the dark, and the lights of the city fell away behind them, and somewhere 8 miles back, in an empty ballroom where the last of the guests were finally being ushered into taxis, a waiter was clearing a champagne flute from a small round table near a window, and he lifted it carefully, not knowing whose it had been, and carried it into the kitchen and washed it and set it upside down on a rack to dry. And in the back of a black sedan, Elena Carter, 5th-grade teacher, was pressed against the side of a man whose breathing had finally begun, for the first time since his shirt had grown a dark wet spot on the collar, to slow. The safe house was not a house. It was the second floor of a warehouse on the north edge of the city, above a boat repair shop whose owner had worked for Adrian's family for 22 years without ever once asking a question, and the stairs up to it came off the back alley, unmarked, behind a steel door with a keypad that Marco punched in the dark without looking. Elena was barefoot by the time they got there. She had taken off her heels in the car somewhere during the 9th mile, because her feet had started to shake so badly she could not keep them flat, and she had not put them back on, and nobody had suggested she should. The second floor was one long room with tall windows painted black on the inside, a bed on one end, a kitchenette on the other, a sofa and a table and 2 lamps, and a small bathroom behind a door that did not quite close. It was not beautiful. It had not been made beautiful. It had been made, Elena understood, for this night and for other nights, and for other people. And Adrian had not shown it to her before because he had been hoping she would never see it. Marco brought up a duffel bag. He set it on the table. He looked at Adrian. He looked at Elena. He said, to no one in particular, "I'll be downstairs." And he went. They were alone. Adrian sat down on the edge of the sofa. Slowly. More slowly than he had sat down all week. He unbuttoned his jacket, shrugged out of it, and let it drop beside him. The collar of his shirt, Elena could now see, was not a small dark line anymore. It was bigger than that. It was not enormous, but it was bigger than that. "Sit down, Elena." "I'm going to get a towel." "Sit down first." "Adrian, sit down first, please." She sat. She sat on the sofa next to him. Her knees were shaking. She had not noticed they were shaking. She was still in the green dress, with his mother's earrings in her ears, and her feet were dirty from the floor, and her hair was coming loose at the back from where she had pressed it against his thigh in the car. She looked and felt like a woman who had walked out of one life at 6 in the evening and did not yet know what life she was in at 10. "Okay," Adrian said. His voice was steady, but it was not quite steady in the way she knew. "Now, towel, please." She got up. She went to the bathroom. She came back with 2 towels and a bowl of warm water, and because it was the only thing she could find in a drawer in the kitchenette, a small bottle of very cheap vodka. "Take your shirt off." "Elena, take your shirt off, Adrian." He looked at her. He almost smiled. He unbuttoned the shirt. She helped him peel it away from the left side where the blood had started to dry and stick, and she saw when the fabric came away that the cut was not deep. It was about 3 inches long, along the top of his shoulder, ragged, the kind of cut a piece of safety glass makes when it comes apart in a car. It would need to be cleaned, and it would need something holding it shut, but it was not the kind of cut she had been preparing herself for the length of a car ride to find. She sat on the sofa beside him, and she began, without asking, to clean it. Her hands were steadier than they had any right to be. "Where did you learn to do this?" he said quietly, after a moment. "My mother was a nurse." "I did not know." "You didn't ask." "No." "She taught me how to clean a cut before she taught me how to ride a bike. She said I'd need the first one more." She was right. She usually was. They were quiet for a while. She worked. He did not wince. He did not speak. The warm water in the bowl went pink, and she dumped it and got more, and the second bowl went less pink, and the third bowl barely at all. She poured a little of the vodka over the wound. He hissed once, short, through his teeth, and she said, "Sorry," and he said, "Don't be," and they did not say anything else for a minute. Then she said, "Who was it, Adrian?" He closed his eyes. A man named Alexander Mihov. He has been in this city for about 4 years. Before that, he was in Rotterdam. Before that, somewhere I never learned the name of. He took over a small operation on the east side about 18 months ago, quietly, and he has been expanding it ever since, quietly, into the seams between what I do and what the legitimate world does. A year ago, he began buying information from Luis Bento. 6 months ago, he bought a piece of a container yard I have been trying to acquire. 3 months ago, he made an offer on a distribution company I already own. I declined. He was not pleased with how I declined. Is he the one who... Tonight. Yes. Was it him in the car? No, he does not sit in the car. Men who sit in the car for Alexander Mihov are paid not to know his name. It was 2 of them. We have 1. Marco's people took him off the road 6 miles back. He is in the boat shop downstairs at this moment. He is alive. He will answer questions. Adrian. Yes. Are you going to kill him? He looked at her. His face was very tired. That depends on what he tells me, Elena, and on who sent him, and on whether there is a way to resolve this tonight that does not involve the thing you are asking about. I will tell you the truth. I do not know yet. What I know is that I am not going to lie to you. I'm not going to send you out of this room and pretend this is not a room where things happen. You are past the point where that would be useful to you or to me. She finished with this cut. She pressed a folded towel against it. She held it there with one hand and reached across him for the tape in the bag Marco had brought up, and she taped the towel down over the cut, tight, the way her mother had shown her. There. It will hold until someone proper looks at it. Thank you. Don't thank me for courtesy. He laughed. He actually laughed, a real small, low laugh, tired, surprised by itself. I walked into that. You did. Elena. Yes. Sit. She sat back. The adrenaline was starting to leave her body now, and it was leaving it the way adrenaline leaves a body, badly, all at once, in a wave that made her feel as though someone had unplugged her from the wall. Her hands started to shake. Her teeth chattered once. She clenched her jaw to stop them. She could not quite. He reached over without looking and pulled her into his side carefully so that the cut on his shoulder was on the far side, and she put her forehead against his chest, and she closed her eyes, and she let herself shake. He did not say anything. He put one hand on the back of her head, heavy and steady, the way he had in the car, and he let her shake. Adrian. I don't want to go home. I know. I don't mean tonight. I don't mean the safe house. I mean home. I don't want to go back. I know. Don't make me decide tonight. I won't. Please, Elena, I will not make you decide tonight. I will not make you decide tomorrow. You are safe here. You are safe with me. I will not move you or ask you or push you. Sleep when you can sleep. Wake up when you can wake up. We will talk when you are ready. Okay? Okay? They sat there for a long time. She fell asleep eventually with her head against him. She did not know that at some point he had pulled the throw off the back of the sofa and laid it over her. She did not know that at some point Marco had come back up the stairs, paused in the doorway, seen the 2 of them, and turned around and gone back down again without saying a word. She did not know that at some point around 4 in the morning, Adrian had gently moved her down onto the sofa, put a pillow under her head, and gone downstairs. She did not know what he did downstairs. She did not ask. In the morning, she knew, by the way he moved when he came back up at 6, that the man in the boat shop had given him the answers he needed. She knew by the way Marco came in behind him at 7 and set down a folder and said, "It's done. The yard. The distribution. The routes. Mihov is looking at a very different morning than he planned to." That something had shifted in the city overnight. She knew by the small, private, almost unbearable tiredness in Adrian's eyes when he sat down across from her at the little kitchenette table and poured her a cup of coffee with his left hand because his right shoulder would not lift properly yet, that the something that had shifted had cost him something, and that he was not going to tell her what. Elena? Yes. I owe you a conversation. I know. Drink your coffee first. She drank her coffee. He drank his. He looked at her over the rim. He put the cup down. When you walked into my office 13 days ago, I had already decided before you sat down that I was going to say no. I had decided before you opened the door because the receptionist had described you to me and it was clear you were not a problem I wanted. I listened to your story because I was curious. I agreed to help you because I was dishonest with myself about why. I told myself at the time that it was because of your ex-husband's family name, and because I saw an opportunity in it. That was part of it, a small part. I have thought about it a great deal this week, and I believe the real reason I agreed, Elena, is that when you sat down in my office and told me what your life had become, I recognized a feeling in you that I have been carrying for a very long time, and that I have never heard anyone name out loud. The feeling of having disappeared while you were still standing there, of having become, in a room full of people who once knew you, a kind of silence. I did not agree to help you for the reasons I told myself. I agreed to help you because I wanted, for a little while, to be in a room with a person who was not a silence to me. You sticky... She was quiet. I was not prepared, he said, to feel the way I feel now. Adrian, let me finish. Okay. Last night in the car, before the window broke, I was about to ask you to dinner tomorrow night. I want you to know that I meant it. I want you to know that I was not going to take you to dinner as a thank you or as a courtesy or as part of the arrangement. I was going to take you to dinner because I wanted to, because the thought of you leaving my house on Monday morning and going back to Merriweather Day School and never walking through my front door again had become, for me, over the course of the last week, a thing I could not picture. The arrangement was supposed to end tomorrow. I had planned it that way. I had told you it would be that way. And somewhere around the 5th day of you being in my house, Elena, I stopped planning for Monday. And I want you to know that I know I am the one who broke the rules I set. She set her cup down. Her eyes were stinging. Go on. Here's what I'm going to say to you now. And I am going to say it once, and then I am not going to say it again until you answer me. You do not have to say anything today. You do not have to say anything this week. You can sit with it for as long as you need, but I want you to have all of it because you deserve to. All right. Last night was not a freak accident, Elena. Last night was a warning, and it was aimed at me, but it passed very close to you. The next one might not pass. If you stay in my life, that is true. If you walk away from it, that is not true. If you walked out that door this morning and got in a car to the airport and flew to your mother's house in whatever state your mother lives in, within 3 weeks, Alexander Mihov would have no reason to look at you. And within 3 months, he would have no memory of your name. You could go back to your apartment over the laundromat and your classroom full of 5th graders, and you could marry a dentist, and you could live an entirely decent, entirely quiet life, and no one would ever come for you. I can make that happen. I have the resources to make that happen. I will make that happen if you ask me to, and I will not try to talk you out of it, and I will not come to your door in 2 years, and I will not write to you, and I will not look at the apartment over the laundromat on a computer screen from my office at 3 in the morning the way I know I would want to. That door closes if you choose it, Elena. I will close it myself, and you will be safe. She was crying now, quietly, steadily, not loud, and she did not try to stop. Or, he said, or you stay. And I will not lie to you about what that means. It means your mother will never fully understand what your life has become. It means you cannot go back to teaching, not in this city, not under your name. It means that for a long time, maybe not forever, but for a long time, you will live inside walls that have been raised on purpose to keep you there. It means that when I leave the house for work, some days I will not be certain I am coming back, and you will have to learn to sit with that certainty of uncertainty, because I cannot make it not true. It means you will meet my brother, eventually, and it means you will be the second person in my life in 19 years that I have let him meet. It means there will be nights like last night. Not many. I will work very hard to make it not many, but there will be some. And it means that the woman I am asking to stay in this room with me is going to be someone I rely on in ways I have not relied on anyone in a very long time. And Elena, I am not a man who is good at being relied on. I am a man who is going to have to learn. Adrian, I'm almost finished. Okay? The last thing I want you to know is this. The life I am offering you is a life in which I cannot promise you safety, and I cannot promise you peace, and I cannot promise you that the world we build is going to look like anybody else's. What I can promise you is that I will not lie to you, not once, not even when a lie would be easier, that I will not make decisions that concern you without your voice at the table, that I will not raise a hand to you in anger, not ever, and that I will not raise my voice to you in anger more than once before I apologize. That I will sit across a kitchen table from you for breakfast every morning that I am able to, even when I am tired, even when I have not slept, even when I have something on my mind I cannot tell you about yet. That if I ever decide I do not want this life with you anymore, I will tell you first, to your face, before I tell anyone else. That is what I can promise. Those are the things I know I can keep. Anything more than that would be me lying to get you to stay, and I would rather you leave honestly than stay for a lie. He exhaled. He drank the rest of his coffee. He set the cup down. Take your time, he said. She took her time. She took, in fact, almost 4 full minutes of silence, in which neither of them moved, in which the city outside the painted black windows began to wake up, in which somewhere below them a man was closing up the boat shop for the morning, and a delivery truck was backing into a loading bay across the alley. At the end of the 4 minutes, she wiped her face with the back of her hand, and she looked at him and she said, Adrian. Yes. I have a question. All right? Am I allowed to say I want the thing without having decided forever? What do you mean? I mean, I think if you ask me right now, do I want to stay? The answer is yes. And I also think if you ask me, am I sure? The answer is no. Is that a kind of answer you can use? He looked at her for a long second. Elena. Yes. That is the only kind of answer I trust. Oh. Stay today. Stay tomorrow. Go home in a week if you need to go home in a week. Go home in 6 months if you need to go home in 6 months. There is no quiz. There is no wrong answer. There is just the next day and then the next one. We can do it that way if you want. We can do it that way for as long as you want. Okay? Okay? Okay. I'll stay today and tomorrow, and we will see about the day after that. He did not move. He did not reach for her. He did not do anything dramatic. He sat across the little kitchenette table from her, tired and cut and shirtless under a folded towel, and he let his eyes close for 1 second, and when he opened them, there was something in his face that she would only be able to name for herself much later, as the look of a man who had been holding his breath for many years and was finally, slowly, remembering that he did not have to. All right, he said quietly. All right. They did not live happily ever after. That is not the shape of this story, and neither of them would have recognized themselves in a story that had that shape. What happened instead was this. Elena stayed through that Sunday, and that Monday, and that week, and that month, and that year. And the day on which she would have said, I am no longer deciding one day at a time, came and went without either of them marking it. And the decision turned out, as such decisions often do, to be something that had happened slowly, underneath the days, while they had both been busy doing something else. Alexander Mihov left the city on a Tuesday, 12 days after the wedding, having lost, over the course of those 12 days, 3 of his 4 major streams of revenue in Blackhaven, 2 of his best lieutenants, and a piece of his personal reputation he was not going to get back. He did not die. Adrian did not kill him. Adrian, Elena learned only years later and only by accident, made a decision that night in the boat shop that he had not made in a very long time, which was to let a man live for the specific purpose of letting other men hear that he had let a man live. It changed the way the city looked at Adrian Voss in ways Elena would not entirely understand for a long time. He did not explain it to her. She did not press him. Marco stayed. Rosa stayed. Carlos stayed in the hallway for 3 more months, and then only at night, and then not at all. The man who had been in the boat shop left Blackhaven on a bus with a broken nose and a promise made to the wrong person, and he did not come back, though his name turned up once more, much later, in a file Elena saw by accident and did not ask about. Richard Prescott did not do any business with anyone connected to Adrian for the rest of his life. He retired from shipping 2 years later, at a younger age than was usual, and he moved to a small town in the Carolinas, and he was, by all accounts, much happier than he had been. His wife Candace sent Elena a Christmas card, exactly once, the December after the wedding. It was a picture of a beach. There was no note. Daniel Prescott and Vivian Ashford were divorced within 14 months. Elena heard about it from her mother, who heard about it from a friend of Candace Prescott's, and she listened to the story the way she would have listened to the plot of a movie she had watched once in a hotel, with a polite, distant interest. When her mother said, at the end of the call. "Are you all right, honey?" I know you loved him once, Elena realized, sitting on a balcony at the back of Adrian's house looking out at the harbor, that she had not thought about Daniel Prescott in nearly 9 months, and that the name in her mouth when she tried to say it felt the way the name of a former student feels. A person who was real once, and had been important once, and had moved out of her life in a way that did not leave a hole in it. She said, "Yes, Mom, I'm all right. I'm really all right." She hung up the phone. She sat on the balcony for a long time. Behind her, somewhere in the house, Adrian was on a call she was not part of. In a little while, when the call was over, he would come out onto the balcony with 2 glasses of the pear brandy, and he would sit down beside her, and he would not ask her who she had been on the phone with, because he had decided early on that there were certain questions he was not going to ask her, and he had kept that promise, the way he had kept every other promise he had made her on that first morning in the safe house. She did not go back to teaching 5th grade English at Meriwether Day School. She did not go back to the apartment over the laundromat. She did eventually teach again, though not at a school. She taught adult literacy at a community center on the south side of Blackhaven that had, quite coincidentally, received a very large anonymous donation the month after she began volunteering there, which enabled the hiring of 2 additional teachers and the purchase of a new set of computers. Elena did not ask Adrian whether the donation had been anonymous because of her or in spite of her. Adrian did not volunteer the information. It was one of many things in that house that were simply true. She wore her grandmother's ring on her right hand. She wore on her left hand a different ring, which Adrian gave to her 8 months after the wedding, in the kitchen while Rosa was making stew, without kneeling, without a speech, without any of the things people are supposed to do. He was leaning against the counter. She was sitting at the island. He said, "Elena, I have been carrying this in my pocket for 3 weeks. I am tired of carrying it. Do you want it or not?" And she laughed, and she said, "You are the worst proposer who has ever lived, Adrian Voss." And he said, "I know. Do you want it or not?" And she said, "Yes, give it here." Jesus. And Rosa, at the stove, did not turn around, but she smiled the biggest smile she had smiled in 12 years of working in that house. And she kept stirring, and she did not say a word. They were married eventually in a small civil ceremony that Marco witnessed. Adrian's brother flew out from San Diego. His name was Luis, and he was warm and quiet in a way that was entirely unlike his older brother. And he hugged Elena the first time he met her the way a man hugs the sister he has always believed he had and never yet found. His children were not at the ceremony, but the year after they came to visit, and they met her, and they called her Aunt Elena. And Adrian stood in the kitchen that morning and watched his youngest nephew color a picture of a goldfish at his table. And Elena, watching him from the doorway, saw a thing on her husband's face that she did not know she had been waiting a year and a half to see. Herbert the goldfish lived, improbably, for 6 more years. The day he died, Elena cried harder than she had cried the night of the wedding, and Adrian sat on the bathroom floor with her while she did. And he did not say a single practical thing, and he did not offer to replace the fish. And when she was finished crying, he put Herbert in a small wooden box that he had, without explanation, had made to fit a fish of that size some months earlier. And he buried him in the garden under the rosemary, and he held Elena's hand while he did it. She did not ask him when he had had the box made. She did not ask him why. She did not need to. If the story had a lesson, and Elena, who had been a teacher for a long time, believed, in a way that was not quite polite to believe in the world she now lived in, that most stories did, the lesson was not a tidy one. It was not that women must be rescued because Elena had not been rescued. It was not that love heals damaged men because Adrian Voss was not healed and was not going to be, and she did not try to heal him, and he did not pretend to be something other than what he was. It was not that the past can be outrun, because it could not, and theirs was not. The lesson, if it was one, was simply that some people spend a part of their lives learning to make themselves smaller so that other people will not have to see them, and that the work of undoing that is not romantic and is not beautiful, and is not the work of one grand night in a ballroom in a green dress. It is the work of a morning, and then another morning, and then another one. It is the work of learning to drink a glass of water without thanking the person who brought it to you. It is the work of learning to walk across a room as though the room belongs to you. It is the work, sometimes, of being held by a man who is not very good at holding people, and of holding him back anyway, because he is trying, and because the trying is the thing. And the second lesson, which she did not say out loud to anyone, but which she thought about often on the balcony at the back of the house, was that it is possible to love a person without needing them to be good. That good is a word she had used for years the way Daniel Prescott had used it, to mean convenient, to mean flattering, to mean the kind of person my mother will approve of. Adrian Voss was not good by that definition. He was not, by any definition she had been taught as a child, a man she should have loved. And she loved him anyway, and the love did not make him good, and it did not excuse what he was not, and it did not require her to pretend. He was honest with her. She was honest with him. They built something between them that was not a lie, and that was not an illusion, and that did not require either of them to be a person they were not. In her old life, that would have sounded to her like a small thing. In the life she had now, she understood that it was the only thing. Years later, when a young woman who worked in her literacy program came to her office one afternoon and cried, and explained in the halting, broken way that people explain these things, that her boyfriend had just left her for a woman with more money, and that she did not know how she was going to walk into her cousin's baby shower next weekend and be the one person there without someone on her arm, Elena leaned back in her chair, and she thought for a long moment, and she said gently, "Sit down, I want to tell you something. And when I'm finished, I'm going to tell you something else, which is that you are going to be all right. Not because things are going to work out the way you want them to, they may or may not, but because the question is not whether someone else decides you are worth taking seriously. The question is whether you decide it. And nobody can help you with that question except you. But I will tell you what I know, which is that I was in your chair once, and I did not believe I could do it, and I was wrong. So was the man I believed I could not do it without. Come back tomorrow. We will talk about the baby shower." The young woman came back the next day. Elena helped her with the baby shower. The young woman did not go to a baby shower on the arm of a feared underworld kingpin. She went on her own. She walked in by herself. She said hello to her cousin, and she ate a piece of cake, and she stayed for an hour and a half, and she left when she was ready to leave, and she called Elena that night crying. But they were different tears, and Elena, who by then knew the difference between tears very well, smiled as she listened. That night, when Adrian came in from whatever it was he had been doing that day, which Elena had long ago stopped asking about directly and had learned to read instead from the set of his shoulders when he came through the door, he found her on the back porch with a glass of the pear brandy and her feet tucked up under her on the wicker chair, and she had a look on her face he had come to know very well. "What?" "Nothing." "Elena, I helped a woman today." "You help a woman every day." "Not like this. Like us." He sat down in the chair next to her. He took the glass out of her hand. He took a sip. He handed it back. "Tell me. Tomorrow. Sit with me for a while first." "All right." He sat with her. The sun went down over the harbor. A ship's horn sounded, far out, long and low. Inside the house, Rosa was making something that smelled like onions and garlic and bay. Somewhere in the city, a night was beginning that Elena would not know about and would not ever know about, and that was a part of her life now, a part she had accepted the way you accept the weather. Somewhere else in the city, a young woman who had been in her office that morning was sitting on her own couch, in her own apartment, and she was writing in a notebook. And what she was writing was a list of things she intended to do the following week, and none of the things on the list were small. On the porch, Elena slid her hand across the arm of the chair, and Adrian laid his hand over hers, heavy and steady. And neither of them said anything, because there was nothing to say. They had built a life. It was not a clean life. It was not a safe life. It was not the life that anyone, including either of them, would have wished on the woman who had walked into a 42nd floor office on a rainy Tuesday with a velvet box in her hands. But it was theirs, and it held.